All right, this is number 15.
Oh, sweet. Dude, number 15.
Yeah,
Awesome.
been doing this for 3 years now, two or
3 years?
three, almost three, I think.
Shit.
Right?
Yeah, but
Maybe we started in like early
we're
27. So yeah.
we're becoming a bit more consistent now.
Mm-hmm.
Uh,
Yeah, well, I guess Hangouts made it really easy, and then
yeah,
they fucking knifed Hangouts for some reason. I don't know why, but
Google hates you.
they want to make my job harder and force me to learn things. And so I did about streaming, yay. And you just have to download open source things and then put things in other things and YouTube.
Yeah, so
They make
this
it pretty easy.
I feel like this truck by Elon is such a good example of how effective marketing can be.
Just your reputation.
Because I'm pretty sure, like, if like fucking Ford or something came out with that truck, I'd be like, that's some ugly ass shit. What the fuck is that, right?
Yeah.
And then that, like,
It's
because
like,
this Tesla is like, I mean, it's okay.
yeah.
But again,
I mean,
it's hard to like reimagine the truck.
their rocket was very like uh it's kind of retro, I guess, but there were never rockets that actually looked like that. It's more like Wallace and Gromit or something. You know what I mean? And they both have this stainless steel setup. So
I feel like I don't care that much about what a rocket looks like because, like, that's just. I think we're pretty far from the point of the aesthetics of a rocket mattering much. Just like design whatever helps you get into space most effectively and most cheaply.
like cheaply is the part that I
Yeah.
think, like, when you factor in, so if you're just going for NASA and American government, like dick measuring with the Soviet Union, then I think it was like Apollo, the crew of Apollo, maybe it was Apollo 9 or something. It was the one where they all
Bigger is
died
better.
horribly. What?
Probably bigger is better at that point.
Bigger is better, and so my point was just they have reason to invest in carbon fiber composite insane shit that still actually some of the odd failure modes make it like more understandable that he might, it seems like he's regressed to stainless steel. We're still talking about the rocket, right?
Yeah.
Okay, so do you know what I'm talking about? Let me just show you the Tesla, or no, it's Elon SpaceX.
Yeah, no, I know. I've seen his rocket.
Okay.
Yeah.
It's like it looks like a big, oh, and there's another failure of that. I mean, that's how you, yeah, it
Yeah,
looks
I
like
mean,
a
I'm I'm
sci-fi.
go- I'm gonna, not judge hardly on the failing to put a rocket in space part. Like,
I love how every new billionaire is just like, I have a space program. I have a space program. The Virgin guy has a space program. Who
only
he
three,
flew on
right?
Epstein's plane. He's gonna shoot Epstein into space. That's the Virgin Space.
Well, there's only three, right? So
Okay,
there's,
is it Blue Origin? Is that the Virgin Galactic? That's the, yeah.
I think Blue Origins like Bezos's
Mm-hmm.
deal,
That's what
and
I'm
then
saying. They all are
yeah,
doing
so
this.
I think Blue Origin is Bezos, and Virgin Galactic
Oh
is
boy.
Tesla's or is Branson's. Is there anybody besides those three doing a rocket company?
You know what? Three is all. Yeah, let's see. Billionaires who have a rocket company. Yeah, billionaire space race. Ooh, South African, Canadian, American born Elon Musk. That's right. He's South African. But he doesn't have that annoying accent. American billionaire Jeff Bezos behind Blue Origin and established Richard Branson and Yuri Milner.
Oh, got a Russian.
Breakthrough Star Shot.
That's cool.
Founded by Yuri Milner, Stephen Hawking, and Mark Zuckerberg. I keep seeing people who've been on Epstein's planes. like
But
Branson.
dude, everybody, like, it's not like everybody who knew Epstein
It's
fucked kids. Like,
right, but why? How many times do you fly with people though? Like
well, no,
specifically someone who's already been committed of a sex offense. Just in
yeah, but
general, I guess
not
billionaires.
all of them just kept flying with him after he'd been convicted. It was
You well, a lot of them did. Bill Gates met with him afterwards a bunch of times.
really
And then you know
like
about the
met
Prince
with him or
Andrew.
was at a place where he was at. I have a hard time believing that Gates is a pedophile.
At this point, I have no fucking idea who is and
I feel
isn't.
like,
I'm just
I mean,
many times, despite his past,
we know Bill Clinton certainly fucks kids or fucked kids.
right? Or yeah, illegal people. People are, I don't know how accurate the internet rumor that he's,
I feel like
sacrificed
nobody could be
or
accused of
whatever.
rape and sexual misconduct that many times,
It's
and
like
then just be like,
the
no,
Cosby,
it's a
Cosby
conspiracy.
situation where you're just kind of like, I get that you shouldn't just believe anyone who says anything, especially about a famous person. But if 50 people say a thing,
He's on
then
Jeffrey Epstein's plane 26 times.
Bill Gates's
What?
relationship. Look at this. He reported blah blah blah. Fucking. I hate ad blocker shit. All right. Bill Gates, who said he had no relationship with Jeffrey Epstein. Isn't there a way to use the blockchain to? Okay, what?
It's annoying.
That is so annoying.
Yeah.
Is it just straight up not gonna let me? Huh.
Multiple,
oh no, here we go. It eventually the part below it loaded. Okay. Bill Gates said he had no relationship with Jeffrey Epstein. Reportedly met with the disgraced financier. Why do they keep still calling him that?
Yeah.
Why? That's if you go to that's what I'm
just like put people's money in a fucking index fund.
Who, Epstein?
Yeah.
Yeah. Well, I think his fund. Well, yeah. And there's some article. This was Epstein Cosmo, where they said he only takes money from people with more than $25 million. Financial strategist who only talks, or no, it's who only talks to people who make over $1 million a year. But this was in like the 1980.
Yeah. Well, I mean, that's not unusual for hedge fund managers. They typically,
He's not a fucking.
Well, I'm just saying, even if he's not, it's not unusual for people who take money from rich people to give them returns.
If you type in Jeffrey Epstein into Google Trends, it still calls him an American financier, which I think is funny. And then you can look at the wonderful graph of,
Do you know anyone?
You mentioned him back before here. What? Do I know any who?
Do you know anyone who you like who still thinks the media has credibility?
Yeah, they're like older people, but that's kind of their only. They just never. They're not on Reddit. That's still a rare enough thing.
I feel like
they're not on. Yeah.
Older people, sure, like people in their 60s and shit, but I don't know anybody who certainly not in our age group, who's like, that person's smart, I like talking to that person is interesting, who's just like full on board with like, oh, we need to maintain our institutions, blah blah blah, shit like that.
It's probably becoming rare. Again, though, I think there's like a neuroplasticity thing where people.
Yeah, I think so too.
Because I know really smart people who do, contract law stuff and do programming. The same person, multitask. I know two, but they're much older than me. They're in their, I think, 60s or 60s, yeah, or late 50s or something. And I have to help them with Excel spreadsheet stuff. They did programming like Fortran, and they still could. It's like a weird, I don't know, like maybe things changed, and then if you're so specific to or if you're kind of stuck in what and I mean, people who still use old versions of Outlook that crash all the time and you lose your mail, and I have yeah. I was scrambling around at work because of Amazon Web Services thing failure, and they run our mail, and so our email, and it turns out it was fucking Disney Plus was probably behind it. It was the release because half of their stuff was streamed. There was some agreement, and then I posted about it and made like a joke about it, and then talked about it, and it ended up basically everything I've seen since then on Tumblr anywhere is Azure ads for like the competitor cloud marketplace for it's like 5 times cheaper than Amazon is on the ad, which is I think because like sysadmin like people, you end up with you have control over a range of expenditures that a business doesn't know or care that much about. They just want it to work. And so it's more like your individual, which friendly buttons do I like more, and like what coding language have I gotten used to, or scripting or whatever, and what have we invested just like my own preferences in. And so you end up with a bunch of advertisements happening for you specifically that are really pertaining to money that you've never seen before personally, and I don't know, it's just weird. Like they have to like fucking track you and find all this like, but I guess it's a rare enough position, I don't know, and there's enough money behind the decisions one makes that it's like, oh, if you can get them hooked on this thing, I don't know. That's probably why, Apple was like, you remember all those like fucking Jello computer, the like multicolored Apple. When did you get here? Like how old were you when you?
I was 14. It was in 2002.
That would have been later than well, do you remember
Is this worth pursuing?
No, I'm totally off on a tangent. Is it term? Let me find what were those things called? It was like Apple. Yeah, you remember these at all? This was like sleek and sexy computing in the 90s or something. Do you know what I'm talking about? Do you see this?
Apple tried a products that did not work. It's kind of
Apple makes a lot of products that do not work.
Or they tried a lot of them.
Right. Yeah. Well, they had a
like even the initial Macs were cool, I guess, but they weren't that great until like the sleeker ones.
Okay. I guess I just never used that many. I just had iPods, and then I think I had an iPod Touch maybe. No, I acquired one somehow. I think like cheap on eBay or something. But
yeah, I remember when the iPod came out.
Me too. My brother got a real one, and I got an iPod Mini. So I guess it wasn't actually the first iPod was just the iPod. So I didn't have that. My brother was much more into like enough music that it would. I was still in my Weird Al phase, whatever that all autistics go through the Weird Al phase. But my brother was he had, I don't think, inherited like a wide range, although my dad has a ton of musical tastes from growing up, and just like Queen. He had a Queen, like one of those giant CD racks that would be like there's like 5 stacks of them. And then my brother was into like the Beatles and Bob Dylan, and then all that stuff. And so there was a reason to have it all on that little, and I wasn't, but I remember like fucking around with it in other ways. I'd have like you could get a e-reader on it.
Yeah.
But you could only get it by basically do the equivalent of rooting it back then. You'd have to put extra weird software, I think.
Yeah.
It was a way to get. Yeah, but anyway, you get like all of Wikipedia on it. That's what you got to do if the apocalypse comes. You gotta quickly download the latest fork of Wikipedia or whatever.
Dude, sucks that you haven't listened to that episode of Portal.
Yeah, with
Weinstein and Harris.
Where is it? Yeah.
It's pretty wild to me because, like, I don't know. I feel like I've definitely heard Eric say some things that seem pretty sketchy, but It's one of those things where you hear him say enough things that you're like, maybe the things that he's saying are sketchy. I just don't understand because I don't have um, I don't understand deeply some of the more technical things that he thinks. He's a pretty original thinker.
Sam Harris.
No, Eric Weinstein.
So you're talking about ideas that Eric Weinstein had. That yeah, okay. I
Like,
think I know what you
well,
mean.
he
Right? Yeah.
thinks um, like
Brett talks about evolution in really interesting ways, but
in ways that make people who study the field cringe.
sorry, Brett's
Yeah. It
understanding.
doesn't mean he's wrong, right? It doesn't mean
Right.
he's wrong.
I was gonna say, like, there's people who criticize just so stories, and it like, what else are we gonna fucking come up with? You have a time machine? Like, that's how the Darwin's finches and the seeds were too small, and then like some, whatever. Like, maybe it's some other reason why that happened, but I don't know. There's not a evolutionist intro.
I'm evolutionary biologist Brett Weinstein. My hope in this first video is to give you a sense of my intent for this channel so that you'll know what to expect. I've seen some speculation online about whether or not the purpose of the channel is to talk about politics or biology, and I should take this opportunity to clear that up. I'm interested in what we call politics, but my belief is that it is also an evolutionary dynamic. And so while I will not avoid the topic entirely, I can say that when we talk politics, I will come at it from a biological perspective. I've also been asked who this channel is for. Let me tell you a few things about that. When I was in school, I was not a very good student. The last 15 years, I've been teaching in a way that I think would have worked for me if I had encountered it. That said, I've also had many students who were successful in the classic school context, and they also did well with my teaching style. My favorite students are often the ones who come through, though, thinking that they are not scientifically minded. My belief is that all people are born with minds that natively do science, and that modern schooling drives out that impulse by penalizing and asking certain kinds of questions. I love questions, and the more difficult, the better. So if you also like questions, welcome. What kinds of topics will we address? Well,
he talks about some interesting stuff. I mean, he has one about like headaches in the context of like like mild toxin exposure. Why do some people respond to toxin exposure minimal, stuff that wouldn't kill you or really significantly hurt you or that's not like, why do some people have very different responses to that? And it's like, though, if those 6 people get sick every time we go to that watering hole, the whole tribe knows that one's bad. So sensitivities should vary, especially to intermittent phenomena like that. But then, it's because we communicate. So if we were a solitary species, first of all, we wouldn't be like we are, but at all. I mean, most primates live in groups of different kinds, but like, I think I don't know, but mammals, there are a bunch of mammals that are really solitary and only interact to fuck. That's their
I
and
think
like
that's the
maybe
thing about evolutionary biology and evolutionary psychology generally. That like people especially people into harder sciences, just have a hard time dealing with them because a lot of it's just theory.
Oh, it's like it's somewhere between well, it's like talking about history. It's somewhere between history and physics.
Right.
Is kind of the and history is full of bullshit or full of this was clearly tainted by the eras, who won that war. That's why the other side is the cannibals. That's or like that's so taken as and like anthropologists will acknowledge that, but then we
even
still teach history as what?
Yeah, I don't know, but I like them. I think their intentions are good. I think they have really good insights a lot of time, even if like there should be ideas that are out there, that challenge the mainstream, and they attempt to do it with some sort of rigor. But I think like most of us like them because of their political insights more than the strictly like evolutionary biology stuff, just because we're not in that field. Even though like certain things they talk about are interesting. In the
Weinsteins, or just in general?
Yeah. Well, it's kind of I don't know. It's kind of hard to say because like Brett is evolutionary biology and then Eric is physics, math.
I thought he ended up as sort of an economist, but
well, he works in venture capital, but he got his PhD in math.
okay, that makes sense. Yeah.
Yeah.
He's one of those.
Yeah. But it's interesting because he's like
Mathematical physicist. You're totally right. It was both of the things you said.
a mathematician who doesn't
I don't know what I thought.
who is an atheist.
Um,
Who isn't an atheist, which is pretty unusual.
Well, I mean, he's probably rejecting the title because it's like saying I'm not a rationalist. That's
Right.
because the
Right, right.
rationalists are now, you can go pay the rationalist, or you can see rationalist organizations and go to rationalist clubs
Yeah, that's
and dating apps and fucking. So I can't be that,
yeah.
but I like the idea of rationality.
Right.
I don't think
I don't want to
everything that
be entirely defined by it.
yeah.
Yeah.
And specifically defined that way because
Yeah.
it ends up diverging from whatever this. I think it's just grouping around a thing tends to diverge one from whatever it grouping around like an ideology because there's dynamics that are required to be in a group that then you can't. So like the joke being like an anarchist collective, right? If you're like a libertarian collective where if you take the ideology to its logical extreme, how do you have a collective? You're not an anarchist commune is kind of almost a misnomer, but it's not because any anarchists people who call themselves anarchists can still get in a group. They just whatever the things are that are required, all the reciprocal altruistic behaviors that are required to be in a group, and like not insulting members of your group as much, or at least waiting before you insult them for all the facts to come in, which you obviously can't, or you can't necessarily do for all external things, because the outside is always much bigger than the inside.
Sure.
Except for things sometimes like global warming things, when you talk about the population dynamics, it's like, oh, if it's everyone, then it's, but yeah. So I think you run into a paradox or just a contradictory thing for certain ideologies, if not all of them.
And then some people, just the way they think, just can't deal with groups like that.
Yeah. Sufficient amount of tism is I'll tell you, I have always had trouble fitting into groups, and it's it can be a lot worse. There's certain people who never fit into any groups. But actually, my little college
never
theory.
wanted.
Sorry, what?
I feel like I could, but I just never wanted to
fit into groups.
Yeah.
Yeah, that sums you up pretty well, actually. That it's not a desire, but it's not like there's an impairment there. Whereas in my case, the lack of desire partly comes from getting burned so many times. So this is really interesting, and it's really recent. It was like mid-October, and it's showing. Basically, they didn't focus on SNPs. They focused on, or now they're calling them MSNBs, I guess, but single nucleotide variations. They're focusing on copy number variations, so where you can have like a spectrum of many copies of a gene.
Yeah.
And which this was in my fucking paper from 2012, but copy number variation, blah blah blah. So basically, they said the same part. They're giving Huntington's as an example of copy number variant sensitive trait, and the same variation or the same region of 16p11.2 they identify as being denisovin in origin, which is part of a locus which, quote, exhibits an enrichment of complex recurrent structural arrangements which predisposes humans to the second most common genetic cause of autism, accounting for 1% of patients, which autism has like this really strange genetic etiology where it's like and this is why it's like there's you've met one autistic, or if you've met one autistic, then you've met one autistic or whatever. Where like it just kind of means a social, its original definition and was social impairment, and then you get all these sort of scientific attempts at being like, well, what causes that particular social impairment? And it may not be one particular. Maybe
Right.
like if you have some, in utero, there's all these.
So they
what do you-
found like the baseline frame or like
genetic sort of one. It's saying 1% of cases are caused by this, which is not. That's why it's extremetech.com or whatever. They're not explaining it right, but it's really hard to talk
sure,
about
of
like
course.
genetic influence where it's I think it's, what's the term? There's epistatic, and then there's not pluripotent. It's like poly something. I don't know.
Polymorphism.
But, that's when you're talking about SNPs. Yeah.
Yeah.
Single nucleotide polymorphism. That's the.
I
But
don't
in
know.
this case, it's like when you have one, like schizophrenia is also like this and may actually be genetically sort of opposite autism in a lot of ways, because it's like with schizophrenia you're kind of over applying, overly imparting sort of social competence to like objects, or just that making personalities, embodying thing. You can sort of imagine how like maybe a lot of like ancient religions that have there's this sort of polytheistic type faiths might have come about partly because of the schizotypical tendency in humanity, whereas you're embodying objects with a personality, whereas then the autistic side of things would be like, oh, you're the person, like a lot of the insulting kind of, it'd be like, oh, you're treating that person like they're a thing, because you're running a big
Right,
factory or something.
right.
It's in
It's the
some.
inverse.
Yeah, and so in this context, then if indeed like these species that were, the Denisova isn't known to have had smaller social group sizes than humans, but I mean we've only found a cave with like 7 preserved. I think it was 7 distinct skeletons in it, or parts that couldn't have come from. So they counted at least 7. And then they just drilled into a pinky bone. They drilled into a lot of bones, but the one where they got sequenceable, useful genetic data to the point where they could reconstruct a genome using all these fancy computational techniques, they discovered an entire new hominid species that had never been classified before. It may be like Peking Man or some other group thing that we haven't. But why is it in Siberia? Like I don't know. But basically, the Denisova looks like an offshoot from Neanderthals. I think they have like some mitochondrial overlap, so they may have hybridized. But the important point, the link to the autism thing that I noticed, 8 years ago or 10 years ago, but I started like blabbing about it on the internet like 8 or 9 years ago. But was social group size. Humans are like this huge. We anatomically modern humans 700,000 years ago, or I guess, 200,000 years ago, in Africa, you'd have groups of 200 people. We know that because you can collect together bones and shit from a spot, and you can sort of roughly estimate the effective population size. We don't actually have that from genetic data, but you can also take extant genomes from modern people and look back. But anyway, it's.
Let's just take that as a given.
I mean, yeah, in this case, it makes sense because it's kind of opposite. Then you'd have these small social groups in this other hominid. That other hominid doesn't develop as quickly over time, and you end up with more like sort of inbreeding. But it's really like it's kind of what's happening to like the cheetah. I think there's certain species where they're just dying off because you can't. You need to be able to both adapt to the changing environment, because like there's all these microbes that have thousands of generations within one human generation, or millions of generations, or whatever, or I don't know, the hundreds of thousands, but and so they can adapt insanely fast, and they just have to. And your innate immune, or your immune system can only adapt so quickly. There's certain interesting tricks that we've developed as large multicellular species to kind of get the like police departments are funded better than a lot of criminals, but maybe Mexico would be a bad example of that. But like in the US generally, if the FBI RICOs it or whatever, they have more resources available, even though they can't do as much because they're legally constrained.
You have to. I'm
sorry.
losing track.
I'm basically it's the fact that this is actually why we maintain sexual reproduction at all, but it's the fact that In a bigger group, you have like there's problems of like epidemic diseases, but then you can also, for example, if you have an injury, you could potentially be taken care of. There's more people to like leave back at the tribe and take care of you. So like Neanderthal group sizes might have been like 12 people. That's what it looks like. That was the average group size. And they were like patrilocal and all this like ways that they were sort of opposite Homo sapiens at the time. But basically having a very small social group size means that you can't adapt as quickly. And so turns out the optimum, the thing that led to all of modern humanity, is this is some combination, but it's mostly so it's like humans sort of at a tribal level, we were like Kirby, and we sort of sucked up some traits from an archaic hominid, and then it went extinct. So there's no modern Neanderthals, but a large fraction of the Neanderthal genome exists in a heterogeneous chunks throughout humanity, which is crazy because you're like, oh, that family of Guidos is particularly shaped like barrel chested or whatever. It's like they're all like that.
I don't think it's that crazy. I mean,
it's not, well, it's crazy, I guess, in the current paradigm.
Why?
Partly because it upsets the notion that, and this is something Stephen Jay Gould was a big proponent of, and I think
I mean,
Hamilton.
I guess there are some people who think we're all the same, but it's pretty clear to any clear thinking person that we're not.
I mean, I that's maybe not giving credit to they weren't saying we were all the same. They were saying that we were sourced
similar,
from a bottleneck that forced us to only be making use of variation that came from within that bottleneck.
Right.
And so that's adding a level of simplicity, I think, that's just not, it was kind of, things should be simplified as much as possible, but never, I don't remember the quote, but it's not too simple.
It's just like, if you look at the way the tree branched, it's not like it's just a branch.
It's a bush and bramble. That's and it's
still like interacted with other branches.
It's actually, it's you're right. It's the coming back and sort of through convergence having species. You can have speciation from convergence. You can have like humans and Neanderthals were only like 600,000 or 700,000 years apart, or like 400,000, depends on the estimates you're citing. But when they converged back at least once, probably multiple times. Being able to split means you will get, it's sort of a, DNA is a semi-holographically stored. I don't mean like the holograms thing. I mean in the sense that, like, if you have a card and then you have a data stored on it, and then you break a chunk off the corner, the image that was stored on that card, if it filled it all up, oh shit, you're gone. I'll wait. The earth is in a blaze. The world is in a daze. The way of life today is strange and odd. What happened? Wait, I'm skipping around. That's not the lines. This is boring. Now we get to see the podcast is just Paul messaging or pulling up things. Here, I'll play the Elon Musk thing while.
So the functionality I'm going to describe is within a space that is less than the most popular pickup truck in the United States, the F-150. So we didn't cheat in either width, height, or length. And we're able to achieve much greater capability in the same dimensions, same weight. Yeah. Part of this is the fundamental design change. We moved the mass to the outside. We created an exoskeleton. So normally, the way that a truck is designed, you have a body on frame, you have a bed on frame, and the body and the bed don't do anything useful. They're carried like cargo, like a sack of potatoes. It was the way that aircraft used to be designed when they had biplanes, basically. The key to creating an effective monoplane was a stressed skin design. You move the stress to the outside skin. It allows you to do things that you can't do with a body on frame. So we're able to make the skin out of thick, ultra hard stainless steel. It's really hard. I'm going to show you just how hard. So Franz has a sledgehammer. Yeah, don't hold back. Okay. Yeah. It's a regular truck door. Want me to do this? Go, do it.
I'm back. Can you hear me?
Yes, I can.
Okay, cool.
Yeah, hey, full
I
time.
think. There we go.
Just dropped me. Dude, I got to interrupt you on this one. So apparently Tesla's received 146,000 orders.
That's good. That's good. I mean, that's good for them.
$8 billion revenue.
And it's funny, they had a stock drop before.
Yeah, so it's $8 billion in revenue before, before any of the mods. Because the truck is anywhere from 40 to 70K. So it could be a lot more than that, depending on what mods people want.
Presumably, it will have to be more than that because there's no chance that 140. You said 140,000 people.
Yeah.
I've got none of them have any mods because of some percentage. So it's.
Yeah, no, that's my point. Yeah.
Yeah. I don't know why I clarified to that extent.
That's pretty dope.
But
in fucking that many pre-orders, it's sick. Tesla is killing it.
Yeah, he's doing well. Good for him.
And he's the man. And he likes Andrew Yang.
Yep, he straight up endorsed him.
Yeah.
Pull that up.
Yeah. Did you notice how? Oh! Did you see Yang shit on MSNBC today?
No.
So they hit him up and asked him to come on the network. He was like, "Not until you apologize."
Andrew Yang won't return to MSNBC until they apologize on air to his campaign.
That's awesome. Because they're piece of shit. They didn't give him a question for 32 minutes into the debate. And he has 6 minutes and 42 seconds of talk time the entire debate.
I don't think, MSNBC is as fucked up as ABC. They're all fucked up. There's no because part of it's the general public's fault for not buying newspapers, I guess. I don't know but it's like none of us read them that way. You can just click in the info, it's just bits on a page. Ultimately they have to turn to billionaire donors who are like influence.
But who likes MSNBC? I don't even know these people. Who thinks MSNBC is a legit fucking website that has information worth paying attention to?
So there might be something to.
I guess they're
you remember ads were way overvalued or something. All these this is on the internet, and that's partly because of the feedback they were able to figure out statistically that someone was fucking with the numbers. But I don't think cable's ever had an ability to, there's like Nielsen ratings or whatever. But other than that, there's really no way to get a well, although nowadays it's a lot of digital stuff. But like ultimately, I think they're even more susceptible and less able to course correct for how much advertising revenue should actually, or how much it should cost to advertise on a given website.
Well, it's not even about ads though, because like, I mean, unless like,
well, that's their only way of making money, right?
Unless some of their advertisers like, we really don't want UBI, so fuck that Yang guy.
I guess I shouldn't say advertising. It's like influence of your channel in general. That's probably because like if a billionaire is buying your channel, it's like because they want you to only say certain shit. And
is that true?
They assume, right? Yeah. Well, why else would they? It's not like you're not buying the clip.
Yeah, but that seems like a really specific thing. Like, who's the billionaire that like? I guess they do shit on. They were like pro Warren until she was like single payer healthcare. And they came out with an actual plan for it, and they were like, Buttigieg.
Buttigieg.
So,
what's the deal with Buttigieg? Am I allowed to not like him?
Dude, he's like,
I don't know the rules.
He's such a corporate tool.
Yeah.
It's unbelievable. It's like what somebody would want a young politician to look like in like 1995. And that's like exactly what we don't want. I don't think like it is establishment versus anti-establishment more than conservative versus liberal.
Yeah.
And anti-establishment is the majority right now, in my opinion.
You mean what was anti-establishment? How so? Oh, I got you. No, in general, people are anti-establishment, and the establishment is a tiny minority of blah blah blah.
But well, I don't think they're a tiny minority. I think they have like a substantial amount of people who like buy into their narrative. But in terms of like the narratives that people follow, like with the internet now, like initially it was just like, oh my God, what's happening? Twitter, blah blah blah. But like a lot of us, like for years now, have like curated our, like the way we consume information from different sources that like are just like very far removed from the mainstream and the way they think about things. Like our epistemologies are really different, right? And that's like playing itself out. And like, for example, Tulsi Gabbard, right?
Mm-hmm.
Like, I don't know any older people who like her.
Or demographics. Partly because it's the wokeness part.
Well, because she actually attacks Democrats.
Oh.
Yeah, she's just like, no, this like we shouldn't be.
I heard about. Wait, is she the military one? No, that's different.
Yeah.
That's the yeah. Okay, and she's
also, the one who came out in 2015 and endorsed Bernie, quit the Democratic Party because she said they were rigging the election, and then Hillary has hated her ever since.
Uh-huh.
I'm surprised she just hasn't like accused Hillary of, Hillary type behavior. She called her like the queen of warmongers and all that shit when Hillary called her a Russian agent. Like literally.
I remember this. Right. Yeah.
So like.
Everyone's a fucking Russian.
It's not even like. Nobody even takes it seriously besides establishment people. And that's.
Sorry, I was checking to see if I left anything embarrassing out.
No. That's so what I mean. We're like.
Get that for my dad. He loves Galaga. I think there must have been some phase. It's like the only video game I've seen him play. But anyway, sorry, Tulsi Gabbard.
Well, I was just saying how like. I don't know. It's just interesting how. There's it's funny. It's cool that Yang is literally asking them to apologize on air to him because their behavior is pretty unacceptable. That like they routinely leave him out of things showing who the leaders are. They'll include people who have 1% over him. And like
they'll even say like there's 8 candidates listed and there'll be 7 actual names. He's from the 3rd position.
Yeah,
that happened. That was, or at least I saw a screenshot of it.
Happened consistently, so it's pretty dope that he's just like, okay, if you don't apologize on air to me, like, fuck you.
Owned by the NBC Universal Group.
They're so corrupt. And it's crazy that they have that much influence, that the Democratic Party actually like allows them to host debates. And people like
Comcast? It's owned by Comcast? Wait.
Yeah.
Owned by Comcast, headquartered at Rockefeller. Huh. Sorry, were we? Yeah, it's that she. Well, I mean, are you saying that they? I thought that you said the MSNBC was.
It's owned by Comcast.
Right?
Huh?
No. But you were saying they were pro booty.
Oh yeah.
Okay.
So,
and this was after Warren.
They were pro Biden initially, but it's clear that Biden is just crazy and couldn't beat Trump. He's just not old enough. They're scared shitless of Sanders. Because he's going to nationalize their owners. And then like they were like, okay, maybe Warren, but then Warren like basically was like, we're going to have single payer healthcare. So now it's Buttigieg.
So do you think the single payer part, that the part about that would bother, is it that the billionaires feel like, oh, they're,
it's not just a single payer, it's the wealth tax.
Yeah, that would
that was the like
that'll turn all the media against you, because again, they're owned by bajillionaires now. Yeah. That's, and it has not actually, I don't think it's always been that way. I mean, there's like Hearst from the, you know, the like
I think it's been that way for a while.
But to what extent then did you have any, like the New Republic? Were there some that were,
I think the major ones?
All like since forever? Because like you can have a group of people get pool funds that are bigger, or at certain times in history, that were bigger.
I mean, you don't have to be a billionaire, right? Until Warren's tax starts affecting people. Well, we're gonna take 2% of your net worth over $50 million. Over $50 million?
Is it 2% a year?
Yeah.
That I think that's gonna bother it. It's you got to catch them when they use it. That's the part.
I mean,
if you don't let the dragons have their pile, like you say, well, the government's
okay,
gonna
so
take part
we can argue.
and they'll all just fly away.
We can argue about whether they should. Well, I don't think a wealth tax would be effective unless it was done in concert with all the other OECD countries, and good luck pulling that off. Right. So I'm not like pro wealth tax as a way of making revenue.
Is OECD like places billionaires would want to live?
Basically.
Okay.
So although they might like move to Brazil or some shit, who knows, right? But
that's not, which is not an OECD place, but
yeah,
you could move there if you had security.
Yeah, I mean, you can move a lot of places. Actually, you can move to you can move to Nigeria. You can move to Nairobi. You'd be fine.
You can move to Liberia. This is not to say you necessarily need the security, but it's helpful, I'd imagine.
Liberia's in a rough spot right now. It's a rough spot for Liberia, which is saying quite a lot.
Still, has anything since the last time that we had a podcast, has anything significantly happened? Or significant happened? The soccer player.
There's a planned protest for December, like late December, and they're like, the point of this protest is to get the government to step down. So they're modeling it after the protests in Lebanon, where they're literally just gonna shush it down for like weeks. They're gonna like have like the protesters are gonna organize and be cooking food and shit. And people are just going to shut the society down until the government steps down. That's the plan.
In Lebanon, it was a peaceful protest?
It was peaceful. They were like, they were balling and shit. They were playing music.
Victory for women. Protests held parallel National Day rallies. Independence Day demonstration. So, because in Hong Kong, it's a fucking nightmare. Right now. I guess they weren't being violent either, at least as far as I can tell. But,
no, they have been. There were protesters.
I mean the
bow and arrows.
You're right. That's true. I saw that. Yeah. Where's the um
But it's going to be interesting though, because I really hope they can pull it off. So but the regional dynamics are really interesting, right? So the group, the like regional government, or not even government,
yeah.
like, international association or whatever. It's called ECOWAS. And unlike, let's say, the European Union, they have a military called ECOMOG, which is basically Nigeria, maybe like Ghana and the Ivory Coast. But they've been
So
trying.
they could use it.
Yeah, but they're trying not to set like a precedent where if they don't like you, they'll come in and overthrow you. Right?
Oh, because it's an external army.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So they're trying not to set that precedent, but at the same time, like the Ghanaian president literally said our president was an embarrassment.
Mm.
And they asked him not to go to their country that often because he has a girlfriend in their country. And when he goes there, he has to get like, a presidential motorcade and shit, and he fucks up traffic. But he was doing it and not being that judicious about it. And they were just like, dude, like, you're just going to, you're not even showing up for like a state visit or whatever. You're just showing up to like see your girlfriend. Like, you're fucking up traffic. Like, what the fuck? So, but the president literally said he's an
Bill did shit like that.
Can you imagine if the fucking like president of Dominica was like, Bill, no. Like,
I know.
Every fucking other weekend, Bill.
When Obama would visit New York, they'd shut down whole chunks of the city. But so I figure if Bill, Bill's getting his dick wet somewhere, and
but yeah, so they're like, it's gonna be interesting to see what happens, because it's clear that like no other leader respects him, and they all want him to go. Like, it's so bad that people are having a hard time like getting money out of the bank.
Protests in Liberia over George Way's failure to tackle corruption. Everybody's into this corruption stuff. I can't imagine why. What's going on? That's the car wash thing that Kaio likes to talk about. And then I mean, here we have, there's just that cult of child abusing monsters that ran the country for 30 years. That's all. That's nothing weird. That's just that's how the cookie crumbles.
It'll be interesting to see like what happens.
Jelaine was like she was a train ride away. I wouldn't even have to pay that much. I could use my Zone 2 pass and go to visit Manchester by the Sea. It's like but anyway, I didn't know she was there, so I couldn't go, I don't know.
Anyways, I was talking about Liberia.
Toilet paper. Yeah, and I extended it into corruption, and then that led to Epstein. So,
clearly all roads
lead to it's so true. Here, Robert Maxwell. He's still had.
Why are we looking at Robert Maxwell?
Oh, no reason. But he got the bump right over the Epstein thing too. You go, Epstein.
Shit, dude. Of course. Anyway, so it's just interesting because like.
Such a tiny bump though. Nobody noticed.
What literally what happens in the next few months
in Liberia
could dictate the nature of the interregional government in West Africa.
Right, because using that government or using that military it would require. That sounds like a World War II situation where everybody's kind of, or World War I maybe was the one where they all have different alliances and they when you attack one, then you have
because there's one regional like body.
Okay.
Right? And one like regional arm, like Nigeria has 200 million people. So like what they say goes. Their economy is the largest.
Okay.
But they have a lot of problems, and they're not like necessarily trying to like overthrow governments. It's not like the most important thing to them right now. But basically, like a lot of these militaries, it's like in Liberia, what the U.S. and Nigeria come together to say goes. In the Ivory Coast, what France and the West and ECOMOG, so basically Nigeria, come together to say goes, right?
Okay.
But the interventions they've done thus far has been to like if there's an election, somebody refuses to step down, they'll come in and be like, "You're fucking stepping down." But they haven't,
because they have some ideological framework that they
democracy.
share that
They're
they've
like,
agreed on.
we are enforcing democracy. But what happens when a country votes for a president and then they're like, "Fuck this guy"?
What happens when they vote specifically for a ridiculous president? You're like, shit,
And
this is
you
democracy.
hate him. You hate him just as much as they do.
Yeah.
And they're like, "Fuck this guy."
But he was democratically elected.
Right.
People are just kind of crazy. So
that's
it's almost like that's happened in other countries, right?
Yeah. I mean, I hope they overthrow him. Like 4 more years would be ridiculous. He's just such a piece of shit. Like, but
Everyone elected. It was just little Trumps all over the world.
Yeah. Yeah.
I mean, it's not as, I guess Trump isn't as bad as electing a soccer player. Or is he? I don't know. Soccer player versus reality TV billionaire mafioso real estate.
It's the
mafia connected real estate.
It's the same thing, except America has good institutions. So like if the president's a complete fuckhead, the institutions can still keep shit going.
You mean we have a dense deep state?
Yeah.
that can just kind of keep rolling along. Did you see the deep state fighting Trump? I know that's the narrative with but I'm trying to find what is it? Here it is. The real deep state is about corporate power, not entrenched. Wait, did they change it?
Hold on, I'll be right back.
All right, I'll find this for you. Do 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 do. Wah, 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 wah. There it is. Oh, if I go guest window, all right. Yeah, look, the deep state exists to battle people like Trump.
Well, yeah, I mean, and people like JFK,
That's true. So battle can also mean just spray his brains all over his wife.
Yeah. I don't think they could quite get away with that anymore, though. Oh, who knows, dude? Who knows?
I don't know if it's what I'm worried about. It's like it seems to have been aggression of the potential for, just kind of offing a dude in the street and just being like, what are you going to do about it? And it seems like once the sort of Zapruder type stuff makes its way into the general, the statistical probability of a particular, shall we say, off the books event or whatever, failing miserably and resulting in some connection back to the people running it, that just seems to go up when everyone's got cell phones. It's kind of like, alien sightings were happening all the time until we got phones everywhere, and then it's like nothing convincing. All the stuff you can be like, well, there's easy ways still to spot fakes is the point. And so if everyone has a phone in their pocket, there must not be a lot of aliens running around because they would have video of it that wouldn't be easily reducible to or have obvious evidence of doctoring.
I don't know if I buy that.
So there must be aliens. Well, I would just say the aliens are just backing off when they what?
I think they're real.
Sure, whatever. Whatever you want to, whatever limb you want to go out on. But Joe Rogan limb. I like the ancient astronauts idea. It's kind of
Ancient astronaut?
eventually it's just panspermia, basically. Yeah, ancient astronauts would be basically the idea that, and it's something. I mean, Carl Sagan. Yeah, in the litany of ancient astronaut pop archaeology, the cases of apparent interest have perfectly reasonable alternate explanations. Oh, okay, so all right, so he basically said it's possible, but there's not good evidence and all the, yeah. The ancient astronauts thing is basically saying, oh, there's, aliens must have come to Earth and either, Prometheus style seeded humanity in some way, or with like genetic or technological stuff or whatever. But am I freezing up? Because you're freezing up.
No.
Still there? All right. But
Eating.
and then panspermia is kind of this, it converges on that idea, which is that the theory that life on Earth originated from microorganisms or chemical precursors of life present in outer space and able to initiate life on reaching a suitable environment. So like you could have, so like let's say the technological singularity that all the Slate Star Codex less wronger people talk about is, some inevitability of complex life. And then you hit some point and then you're like, oh shit, we're gonna, explode, or it's easy. Anyone can 3D print a nuke or something. And so you just have to spread out. And then you just get like this, ball of like nihilistic rage or hedonium or whatever. There's just like this expanding trajectory. Then you just have basically all the trajectories going out from that central point. Is that me? No.
Yeah, no, that's somebody's
All
called me. I'll message him. Sorry.
going out from that central point would be the only ones that proliferate, because then you just the big core would just kind of be absorbing stuff and giving up on whatever biology is and stuff. And so those trajectories, the optimum one, the fastest one you could go at would be the simplest organism. So you'd reduce back. I don't know. It's a clean way to. I don't know if panspermia is entire. It's just panspermia is just saying that life was seeded from elsewhere.
I mean, I don't know.
Yeah.
Did you see Rogan's talk with Bob Lazar and that other guy, the Navy pilot?
Yeah, well, he's talking about just straight up aliens. Yeah.
I mean,
That the Navy's seen aliens.
I thought it was pretty convincing, personally. Shit,
yeah,
pretty.
Well,
like
it's
Occam's razor.
It's convincing that he saw UFOs. In my case, he's admitting, right? He didn't go and say they actually talked to me or anything, right? That's what a lot of first like.
No, but like the capacities he was explaining were just not things that humans possibly could have at this point. Like moving 60 miles in 2 seconds.
Okay, so then that technology would have to come from outside, because we don't have hidden tech that would potentially.
I mean, think about it. The government could do that right now. Like, right.
Let's say, for example, think about what could do that.
Any government in the world had that technology. Like what the implications of that would be.
Right, we'd be able to exert more influence in a bunch of different ways and control more stuff. But it's also possible, I don't know, that the Decepticons have been frozen in the Arctic, and although that still comes from elsewhere. So I mean, like an ancient civilization, you might have some tech from there that's getting picked apart inside the Hoover Dam. I don't know.
That's possible. Yeah.
Yeah. It's just so it's like if it didn't come from elsewhere, which is what you're proposing, and that the guy is saying, I think on Rogan he was saying, then maybe it came from, maybe this is more cyclical than we've been led to believe.
Or shit's about to fucking go downhill.
Yeah. Well, the 3D printing nukes thing is like, how do you account for that without like a nanobot panopticon of just everything?
Massive surveillance.
Right. That's so how do you fix a world where like terrorist cells being able to resist a whole giant like modern army empire. I was gonna army, but because we downsized the actual scale of the army a bit, but the like modernity part, it's like a bomb is a bomb. Like it'll still. That's why they tried so hard to get those. You know what I mean? Those V-shaped trucks that have the blast shield on the bottom. And ultimately, though, it just costs more now. I mean, it also, a person doesn't go home in a body bag, which is nice. But like, they just added more C4, which you only have to go up proportionally a bit. And then now you're denting in. My point being that like the weird asymmetrical quality of modern warfare, especially imperial kind of stuff, means that you just have to have somewhere where there's like kind of the potential for either suicide bombing, which is really hard to kind of, it's like if someone's willing to do that, how are you going to be able to, you'd have to scan inside of their crevices and everything in order to let anyone into a big event with lots of people. How do you avoid like an Ariana Grande type thing, like shooting, where the terrorist attack stuff? And also, so that's like mobs of civilians, but also how do you protect your warriors from people who are willing to just like put a cell phone bomb up on a roadside and then get the next guy to do it when they, that they'll be able to easily find more people to do it. And so that just scales up to nukes, which is scary. It's like,
yeah, I mean, I don't know.
I want
Like,
to go to space.
I
That's
just
the
hope,
solution.
I just hope people smarter than me are working on these problems.
Yeah, yeah. I guess like you could have a panopticon that was blockchain
Oh God,
limited.
let's not.
No, I mean in the sense that like it only scans for like radioisotopes, but it'll scan everywhere. Everyone's, no one's making a nuke inside them with a little 3D printer, and
Sure.
there's no weird situations like that. And so you could have something, it's just classically you can spoof something like that. Like you can't have a surefire system. You can like encrypt it and stuff, but like a 3D checksum of a system to be like sure that nobody's got a nuke in there, or that nobody's spoofing, the return signal on your EM scanner doesn't have some interference that's produced by the like an invisibility cloak for your nuke, that sort of thing. There's no real, classically anyway, the caveat, but there's no way to check that. So as usual, Paul thinks the solution is quantum. I know.
Surprise, surprise.
Yeah.
But I don't know. So what else is going on? I'm working on chemistry for selling e-cigs. That's new.
Talk about it. I mean, you've told me about it.
Yeah.
Oh, I guess not the recent changes with the chemistry on it, but
Well, I mean, no, it's pretty
You
simple.
want to talk about why you're working on chemistry with e-cigs?
No, well, no, it's really like we used a solvent that wasn't good enough, so we're using another solvent. It's not.
Just the recent problems you've run into with it, but
Yeah, for like benzoic acid.
That's your.
Yeah, it's not. It's really, really exciting stuff.
Sounds like it. Well, they managed to do it in Breaking Bad they managed to make that exciting. So
yeah,
chemistry.
I don't plan on killing anyone. So
I'm more worried about the batteries on them blow up and shit, right?
What do you mean?
On vapes, because I guess that's more the big like millennial douche vapes thing that pull a deep hit.
Oh, those like big ones that you hold.
Yeah, they have the big glass chamber. Somebody I know who uses
Yeah. Well, my friend keeps telling me that like while there's probably a large market for the cheap ones, there's also a market for like, more unique ones. You could, if you could get them from China, you could probably sell them at pretty good margins. So I'm trying to, just like create a wider market by selling a product that's sufficiently cheap. But, eventually probably like include something like that, and it's gonna fucking explode, and then they're gonna start trying to tax the shit out of me.
That's always how that works. If it's gonna be successful, you're gonna have to. Do you see this protester? They've got the bows and arrows. Is that the
Yeah,
image
dude.
you're
From
talking
Hong
about?
Kong. Yeah, guy like literally. I'm surprised. Did he like? I just be cool if he like put a flame on the arrow.
Well, what I mean, is he shooting at people with it? That seems
Yes,
dangerous.
he's shooting at the government. The government like
Oh,
shot.
I guess actually the headline where I saw Hong Kong got shot by an arrow.
The government shot somebody. Has been shooting protesters. So
I
they're
saw that. Yeah, Hong
fuck you.
Kong cop shoots protester. I saw that. It was with like a revolver or something, or I don't know. Maybe this is just Chinese. Yeah, ridiculous use of live round. It was really weird. He just kind of shot a dude.
Yeah,
Like there wasn't much more to it.
just like shot him in the stomach.
Today, an anti-government protester was shot at point-blank
I
range.
don't even
by
want to
police.
watch CBS.
Another man was set on fire.
That's where all
Both
this international footage stuff comes from.
Violence in more than 5 months of demonstrations there. Ramy Inocencio is monitoring the developments from Beijing, and we should warn you, the video of the shooting is quite graphic.
This skirmish quickly takes a violent turn. A police officer to subdue one protester dressed in white is confronted by another.
Reaching for it? Oh, did they pause it during the?
I
The
guess.
ground, the
Oh, because
abdomen.
it's CBS. This is the other. Oh, god damn it. All right, one sec.
He literally
Here
just
it
shot the dude in the stomach.
Yeah,
What the fuck?
that's right. This isn't, live leak, so they have to have standards. But let me see if there's a. Some viewers may find upsetting. That one froze too? All right. I guess they're all like that. I saw on Reddit, I saw the original. I don't know where it went, but yeah, shit's going down there. And I guess kind of all over the world. You remember when there were all those protests in like London?
When? Like what year?
Young people were, it's London riots. I think like 2014. No, it was probably 2011. That was in 2011. Oh my god. Okay, it's been a while.
How long have we been doing this for, by the way?
2017. Oh, you mean today?
Podcasting, yeah.
Like an hour and a half, maybe. Let me see. Let me check the actual time on the.
Can we take a break? I kind of need to make a quick call.
Hour and 12 minutes. I mean, sure, yeah. I can just play a video on it while you're.
Yeah. All right.
Just mute the thing.
All right.
Yeah.
Good evening, my fellow Americans. Fate has ordained that the men who went to the moon to explore in peace will stay on the moon to rest in peace. For every human being who looks up at the moon in the nights to come will know that there is some corner of another world that is forever mankind. Good night.
Good evening, and what a good evening it is. I'm just sitting here, enjoying my existence. Enjoying being a pumpkin, a bright orange pumpkin on a crisp autumn night. I love to breathe the gentle winds in, and feel the oxygen feed the flames upon my delicate candles that rustle gently in the moonlight. It's October 31st, a night where children laugh and play. A night where neighbors come together and celebrate a tradition, remembering a time where they too could roam carefree. My sculptor recently gave me the gift of eyes, a nose, a mouth, a face where faces shouldn't be, but it's normal on Halloween. And on the inside, I'm warm, lit up with 4 scented candles that remind me of the lavender fields next to where I grew up. It's on nights like these where I feel like my problems are small. Hey, what are you doing?
I extend my congratulations to you on your encouraging quarterly results and positive 12-month forecast. You've satisfied and exceeded the expectations of your shareholders. By the year 2100, the planet will approach a population of 10 billion. That's a lot of mouths to feed, and a lot of homes that I will be able to call my own. Across the globe and throughout time, I have stoked the fires of hungry appetites, and for it, I have become a soup of the people, a soup of honor, a soup of great fame. My ingredients, forged from an era of biological turmoil, are a gift from Mother Nature herself. The nutrients pulled directly from Earth are reconstructed into essential vitamins and fulfill their role in the cycle of life. Can you say you share the same connection to the cosmos when you're sitting there inspecting your scatter plots? When the people slurp my decadent flavors, will they remember you, solicitous hidden in a dark tower? Or will they remember me, their faithful pantry pal? Good afternoon. You already know who I am. That fragrant emulsion of chicken stock, carrots, potatoes, and celery. Derived from your family's culinary tradition. Unbeknownst to you, your only surviving descendant 200 years from now will develop an addiction to something that will be known as the World Wide Web. His aversion to reproductive proclivities will fail to result in offspring and effectively end a blood lineage that had prevailed since the beginning of human existence. But do not despair. The family recipe that you used to make me will be celebrated as a national staple, and I will survive for generations far into the future. Only I will prevail. Your creation. Your soup son.
Emily.
Do electrons think? Electrons are charged particles, the minutest we find in analyzing the ultimate constitution of matter. To think that such a particle can think is so absurd that I might give the answer no and have my talk over. However, the idea has been launched not very long ago. Not, of course, in this patently absurd form, but under a disguise. Of late, it has off and on met with quite honorable reception. Some intellectual hope has been set on it. I wish to plead here for the futility of this hope. To explain matters, I must go far back. There's a very old dilemma in natural philosophy. Are our bodies and the bodies of the animals machines that act of necessity according to their material constitution and under the material influence of the environment, including the impressions on the sense organs? This question, are we automatons, has about as often been answered emphatically in the positive as in the negative. It would lead us too far to follow all the arguments that came to the fore in the long history of the controversy. Strange compromises were suggested. Descartes, for instance, deemed us to be, on the whole, automatons, only the pineal gland, he said, was not. According to Descartes, it was this organ which controlled and directed all our spontaneous bodily movements. What is the present attitude of physiology to the question? We may take for it the word of its past master, Sir Charles Sherrington. According to Sherrington, there is no boundary between the animate and the inanimate. The same laws of physics and physical chemistry hold within the living body as outside. The most careful investigation of the physiological processes in the nerves and in the brain reveals no leverage whereby mind could take direct influence on matter. Mind per se, that is, by its very nature, cannot play the piano. Mind per se cannot move a finger of a hand. This leaves us with the outlook that our body is as automatic or non-automatic as any inanimate piece of matter, any mechanical, chemical, electrical contrivance, only infinitely more complicated than even the most ingenious man-made machinery. The question is thus referred from the tribunal of physiology to that of physics and chemistry.
We're coming up on an election in the U.S. And it's not something to be pursued inside of crypto space for the most part, because we've realized that it is going to require governance and that we can't figure out a way to turn this into
only thing that governs behavior, then that's something that like you can try for, but you're not going to succeed.
Let me try something else with you that I'm curious about. You and I are both plugged into this weird alternate world that thinks very differently. And I had Andrew Yang in that chair, and you saw that episode of the portal before. Some people call this neurodivergence, that this is a non-neurotypical world. And I would say that both you and I exhibit some indicia of not thinking along standard lines. The thing that occurred to me is that you brought up Slate Star Codex, which is this website that is extremely influential in our shared world. And I was thinking about the difference between Slate Star Codex and CNN in terms of sense making. Is there any way in which the Ethereum world can create a counterweight so that the neurodivergent can wrest the stranglehold that seemingly the neurotypical institutional world seems to have on sense making at scale? Like, is there a way of promoting another blog in this world would be like Less Wrong? There are particular thinkers that I think of as being very important, influential. I think you've given to Aubrey de Grey and Eliezer Yudkowsky. There's like this very different world that isn't well known. And in part, I view podcasting as like pirate radio, which is the phrase I keep, or samizdat, because you're Russian.
Yes.
What can we do potentially using your technology to even the playing field between corporate sense making and this kind of homebrewed sense making that seems to me to be of an infinitely superior level? Well, not infinitely, but quite superior.
Yeah, so I think, like, once again, there's kind of two aspects to kind of blockchain TM that I think are equally valuable here. One is the technology itself, and then the other is the existing community around the technology. And I mean, with the technology itself, I mean, you can try to like create institutions for like do even things like funding like podcasts, for example, and like even like things like this kind of Gitcoin grants, quadratic voting, for example. It would be potentially a great way to kind of fund media organizations that avoids the pitfalls of both say present day media, which is funded by some combination of like advertising and like horrible clickbait incentives, and at the same time avoid the pitfalls of like basically centrally controlled media, and like create a third alternative. So, and like it doesn't even have to be quadratic voting. It could be some other kind of mechanism for funding, and blockchains could be used as a base layer for that. There's also the kind of blockchain kind of community as a group of people who care about the many of these kinds of ideas. And I mean, even a lot of Ethereum people are definitely kind of Slate Star Codex adjacent. And I feel like I've tried my best to kind of bring these worlds together and get them to talk to each other. And I mean, sometimes it is a challenge because there's ways in which they're similar, and there's a lot of people who are in both, and there's also ways in which they're sometimes different. But those differences can be a good thing.
Yeah, I guess I'm concerned that we're coming up on an election in the U.S. And I view Fox News and the New York Times and CNN as like watching professional wrestling. It's got a very clear narrative structure before the facts even come in.
Yeah, this is actually one of the things I've only really started noticing maybe in the last like 1 to 2 years. Like it's narratives are something that like don't seem like you're there when you're fully inside of them, but once you kind of step outside and you start seeing that, like, wait, these people are missing something and they're making predictions that turn out to be materially incorrect, like,
And then there's no memory, like there's no cost. And
you want to, there's no accountability at all, then it's something that you just actively start seeking out how to move beyond. Yeah, I think figuring out a better funding model for media organizations in general seems,
because in some ways what I'm concerned about is that something like podcasting is almost a public good, and so the
it's fully a public good.
Well, advertising is the one thing that I call it the business model of last resort.
Yes.
And we are going with an ad-supported model because I don't want to disguise. Somebody offered to endow the podcast, not my employer. And I decided against it because I think what I really want to do is to try to figure out how to improve the business model. We've talked about a couple of different variations on advertising in order to make sure that controversial but very sensible and level-headed people can weather the storm. That the big problem that I keep seeing is that advertisers pull when there's a coordinated campaign to say, drop that program or else.
Yes.
And there's a need for something like the blockchain or a smart contract to make sure that you can't silence people who are speaking decently just because they've pissed off a very large activist community.
Right.
So do you see any way in which the blockchain, for example, like I might give up advertising if I could figure out a way to fund not only this program, but allied programs?
So in 2011, when I was starting Bitcoin Magazine, it started off with like this one anonymous person whose name I'll never know, who, well, aside from Kiba, his internet handle, and who was just paying me 5 Bitcoin, which back then was $4 per article, to write articles for him. And I mean, this was 5 times lower than a minimum wage, but I loved it because it was the highest wage I've ever had. And eventually, despite paying me 5 times less than minimum wage, Kiba ran out of money. And like he told me, hey, maybe Bitcoin Weekly will have to shut down. And I came up with this business model that actually ended up saving it for a few months, and basically saving it all the way until I got kind of poached by Bitcoin Magazine. And the business model is basically, I write 2 articles a week, and we'll publish the first paragraph of each article kind of publicly, and we'll say the rest of these articles is kind of hidden for ransom. And here are some Bitcoin addresses, and if people can collectively come together and pay 2.5 BTC to these Bitcoin addresses,
then free for everybody?
Yes. Then
that's nice.
Yeah, and it actually worked well, and it actually started raking in like much more money than Kiba had paid before. So, and it's not saying like that precise model is going to save,
but it's a clever exploit.
Yeah, exactly. And like, to me, more clever experiments as like what smart contracts are all about. So like, let's try lots of different things, and we're gonna come upon some steps forward that are interesting.
Vitalik, I'd love to have you come back and talk to us about other things and other points, but let me just close by asking you a couple of questions about the mysterious origins of decentralized computing, the blockchain, and all of this.
What if there's just like one guy with a .001 dick?
He's just
throwing
weighing
the
it
whole
all
average off.
down.
Yeah. The one Jewish Korean guy. That's not true.
Oh boy. Sorry for missing out the number, everybody. I really didn't mean it.
There are plenty of Jews with large dicks.
No, there isn't.
Yes, there are.
No, I know because I not only am I good at math
Mr.
because
Ron
I'm
Jeremy.
I know I'm good at math because I'm Korean, but also because I'm Jewish. So I would know better than anybody else
Oh,
probably.
wow. Why is it Bill Cosby?
Now listen to me because as the only Korean Jewish man there is, I can tell you firsthand that there's not many of us. It's just me, and that's why they put me in jail for rape. Because they said the Korean Jewish man, now that man will figure out how to rig the stock market. We can't let him live in free society. We're gonna railroad this man on the railroads that he built and put him in the jail. You see, for raping girls, 47, 48. How many? Who knows? I know because I'm good at counting.
Thank you, Bill Cosby, Jewish Korean man.
You're very welcome.
With a .001 inch dick.
Ladies and gentlemen of the jury, allow me to remove my pants. In what universe could a man with a dick this small possibly commit that number of rapes? I'm just a simple country lawyer who happens to be a Jewish Korean man who's also Bill Cosby. But I do know one thing, is that my dick is too small to have committed that many rapes, you see.
So yeah, that's a sound legal defense. That's really good. What if that was Cosby's defense? He pulls his cock out.
His dick's
We
too
just all
small.
see his little ass dick. What if his lawyer's like, Bill, you gotta chop your cock off. That's the only way out of this one.
I refuse to do it. Sometimes a man has to have principles. I won't cut my dick off. I said, Rudy, get in here. I'm going to tell you a story. What's that, Daddy? You see, this is a letter from my lawyer saying they want me to cut off my dick. But am I going to do it? No. That's right, because I'm a doctor.
That's
And I
right.
I have principles.
Oh man.
Wow.
Good stuff, man.
That was
Free.
But in the tribunal, to keep to the simile for a moment, there sits by the side of the judges a non-jurisprudent assessor, namely our own little self, which finds it distasteful to pass for an authority. Now, what does physics say to it? The situation is peculiar. From the earliest beginnings of physical science, we meet with a firm conviction that everything that happens is governed by inviolable laws, so that the course of events forms an inevitable and unalterable infinite sequence of causes and effects. The first atomic physicist was Euclid, a contemporary of Socrates in the 5th century BC. Of Euclid, only 2 sayings are preserved. One, that he refused to believe that sun, moon, and stars are living beings, and the other, which concerns us here, is that nothing comes to pass without a cause, but everything happens by reason and of necessity. This he maintained in the 5th century BC, and towards the end of the 19th century AD, physicists were fully prepared to endorse his opinion. But now comes the peculiar thing. Twice, within 2,500 years, there was a notable departure from the belief in the strict necessity of physical events. The first time, this happened only about 150 years after Euclid. We gather this from the didactic poem of Lucretius, who was the posthumous mouthpiece of Epicurus, who lived in the 4th century BC. Their suggestion had no consequences, it was all but forgotten. The second time the strictly causal linkage in the chain of physical happenings was thrown into doubt was only 30 years ago by Franz Exner in Vienna. About 10 years later, that is about 20 years ago from today, the disbelief in strict causation became part and parcel of what you might call the new creed now adopted by most physicists and called quantum mechanics. Both times, the alleged breakdown of strict causality in the domain of physics was hailed for removing the obstacle in our understanding the spontaneity of the movements of the animals and of man. In understanding free will, as one usually calls it. Let us see whether this claim is justified. The hypothesis, as reported by Lucretius, was very simple indeed. He just states that the atoms do swerve in a very small but entirely undetermined and unforeseeable way from the courses you would expect them to take from supposed strict physical laws. No theory of the swerves is offered. This amounts to saying that the strict laws are only figments. The actual path of a particle is to a small extent arbitrary in the neighborhood of the fictitiously prescribed path. It is not illogical to surmise that the several little arbitrarinesses of the single atoms collaborate to bring about the apparent arbitrariness in the behavior of the animals and of man. What Lucretius forgets is that he has explained nothing. He has solved no problem. He has only referred the problem back to the ultimate particles, where it has become much more difficult to grapple with. The simplest spontaneous bodily movement, say the lifting of my arm, would require the planned collaboration of billions of single atoms in their undetermined swerves if they should bring about the integrated action. In modern physics, the denial of strict causation is of entirely different nature, in two respects. First, there is no question of only small departures from a fictitious exact law of motion. The behavior of primal particles, as electrons, for instance, or small atomic systems composed of only a few of them, is now supposed to be undetermined and unforeseeable within a wide margin of uncertainty. It is thought that in times we have to allow a particle the choice between several entirely different courses to take. Let this for the moment be figurative speech, meaning only that nothing in the observed situation determines the course the particle actually takes. But on the other hand, the situation is supposed to determine with rigorous precision the statistics of the various possible choices. Given the same situation over and over again, the particle will, for instance, in exactly 2/3 of the cases follow one course, in 1/3 of the cases the other one, and similarly when there are more than two courses to follow. Again, the same as 2,000 years ago, it has been suggested that this breach of strict causation leaves room for the display of the spontaneous movements in the animals and in man. Is this claim now justified? I think not. There are grave objections from physics, from physiology, and from philosophy. From physics. If the individual, or its mind, or whatnot, could make free use of the choice left to the single electrons, this would infringe the statistical laws when a synoptic view of many similar cases is taken. This is as bad or as good as a breach of strictly causal laws. If we suspend physics in the living body, we can explain anything. I'll put this point briefly and classically. It could be clinched in all detail. To explain the physiological objection, let me observe that physics strictly disallows a mutual dependence of the choices taken by various electrons unless they are close neighbors. One would therefore have to assume, and this has been proposed, a master cell, and within it a master molecule. And here the choice on the atomic scale would take place and would determine a spontaneous movement of the whole body. This is flatly contradicted by what we know about the functioning of the brain. The number of brain cells cooperating in such a case is enormous, and the idea that they should always be set at work by one master cell, even if it were not to be always the same one, is ludicrous. But assume you could override even this objection. There might be a delicate system of relay action, which we may have hitherto failed to discover. Then I am left to believe that a single electron, or very few of them, by making use of the free choice the primitive laws of physics leave them, should enact a movement of my body. However, this movement is sometimes preceded by a long deliberation, a careful and maybe painful weighing of motives. This ultimately disposes, let me say, my mouth to open and to pronounce the name of a person I hesitated to give away. It is not only obvious, but actually indubitable, that the preliminary deliberations involve extended parts of the brain, billions and billions of cells. To assume that this activity eventually determines the decision in the supposed master group of electrons would entirely spoil the game. For the point was that their behavior was to be exempt from physical causation. If you want to keep this up, you needs must be prepared to let all the thinking and weighing of motives be done by the one master group of electrons alone, and without any accompanying physical process. This is absurd.
Quantum mechanics and the shape of atoms as discovered by Schrödinger. We all know about quantum mechanics, which is of course the physics theory that describes atoms and elementary particles, how they move around like slushy little waves, and interestingly, it predicts what they look like, what shape they have. It was invented in the first couple of decades of the 20th century by a lot of people all working together. Amongst them were Planck, Heisenberg, Bohr, Davison, Du Bois, Einstein, and of course...
The line from the, just so that it's in the episode, the line from the South Park episode that I was trying to look up before was the direct quote is, "There's another guy, someone else who was in the Witches Club but hasn't been around for a while." I don't think that's about Weinstein. Everybody thinks the episode's about Weinstein. That sounds like it's Epstein actually, but you know, but what do I know?
That's a rabbit hole. Anyway, let's get back to Peterson.
Right.
So I wanted to start by actually having you explain to me what you understand his ideology to be, because I think they're actually two aspects or two. There are many levels that works on, but for my purposes, there are two levels that allow him to define truth as he sees it, or say so he defines he gives the basis for his understanding of what truth is, and then from that point on, what truth can be, and then he states what his truth is, and that's my sense of it. But I'd like to get your sense of it.
I think it was sort of hashed out in the Sam Harris podcast, the second one, obviously the first one the deadlock. But that wasn't. Is that would you say that's largely been your exposure to Jordan Peterson? Has been the
No, so I've watched some of his lectures, watched some of his interviews, listened to critiques of his critique of postmodernism, and I guess no one can accuse Peterson of being an intellectual lightweight. But one of my problems that I've noticed is that because of the backlash to what you can consider, I suppose, sort of an authoritarian element in center of left politics, people who consider themselves liberal support things like universal healthcare and gay marriage, that sort of thing. They all flock to people who also support those things, but then have ideas that allow them to preserve certain notions that make them feel comfortable. Peterson and his religious arguments, I think, and this is my analysis of the situation. I could be wrong. It's obviously everything, but I think Peterson allows people to be comfortable with certain things that they hold dear.
Right, which isn't necessarily it wouldn't necessarily be a direct contradiction in his ideology, except he also professes truth as the ultimate. Always speak the truth. Which you're saying it kind of looks like either. Is that what you're saying is inconsistency? Go ahead.
Well, okay, so I'll just read a few things here, just some of the notes. So he says the Christianity that Dawkins objects to is the type that a smart 13-year-old objects to.
That seems. I mean, the variants of Christianity are akin to the sort of absurd times of periods in Christianity's relatively recent past. Sometimes, if you're talking about Scopes Monkey trial, but also
depends on where you live in the world.
No. And I was saying all of it's like all of these cases, like the Scopes Monkey trial, or the or arguing about.
Have you seen this? I'm back. I think I'm back. One sec. Can you hear me?
I can hear you, but you're frozen. Mommy stuff.
This is just I don't remember where I found this. But
just down the rabbit hole.
Yeah, well, they've been putting out a lot of material, and it's just really interesting, weird. Have you seen the new Rick and Morty?
I have not. It came out?
Oh yeah, no, they're on episode 2, the Shy Pooper episode.
That's awesome. I'm definitely gonna check it out.
Yeah.
Oh, so did the Vitalik Buterin cast come out?
Yes, with Weinstein, and actually I was playing that while you were gone.
Oh, interesting.
Is that what you mean?
Yeah. That should be interesting. I'm looking forward to listening to
Well,
that.
they talk about. I played the part already, but they talk about Slate Star Codex stuff. Am I coming through, or am I still frozen?
No, you are. What
I'm still frozen?
No, you're not frozen.
No, I'm coming through.
What
Okay.
aspect of Slate Star's Codex do they talk about?
Well, it's like them as an alternate media source that's not necessarily ad driven as their. It was mostly him asking about Slate Star Codex and Less Wrong, which I think maybe Weinstein doesn't realize, or Weinstein doesn't realize the fact that one birthed the other. Basically, it was a diaspora from the Less Wrong people.
Yeah.
It's all these people, they're rationalists. Actually, some of them got arrested recently at a camp. This was pretty funny. CFAR is the something for, what is it? It's for not the AIDS one. CFAR rationalists. Let me find it. Center for Applied Rationality. Okay. And the CFAR.
What? A
the
center,
name
a
sounds
center for applied rationality.
yeah. It is ridiculous, yeah. But protest. I think it was outside of a camp. Yeah, here we go. 4 people in Guy Fawkes masks arrested after scaring families at West Sonoma self-help retreat.
That's hilarious.
And it's because they apparently, well, so first of all, CFAR has got like it's kind of a sex cult. I mean, it's a weird culty, it has a culty vibe. We'll leave it at that.
Sure.
And they're not immune to scandal. And these people were protesting CFAR. And I think this might be the article where they actually asked one of them. I love the fact that one of them said that it was they were unintelligible at first, which is like, I don't know why they would be. I guess rationalists are the really hardcore ones tend to be, well, they're a special type of folk. Yeah, 2 of these people had no known addresses and appeared to be transients, which I don't know if that's offensive, but the 4 suspects are 28-year-old Jack Lasota, Berkeley. Yeah, and then one of them paid his own bail or her own bail, and they have like a GitHub, like it was the one of them that programmed more regularly or whatever and had a real job, and they had like $50,000 bail or some ridiculous amount. But anyway, they got they got arrested because they showed up probably because they showed up at the wrong time, and it was like some children's thing was going on, not the CFAR event. At Westminster, CFAR was hosting a weekend retreat for its devotees, which included previous workshop attendees along with their families. This Chronicle reports some of the drama on Friday with the arrested protesters was that they arrived in these scary-looking masks, hooded robes, and black rubber gloves, just as a bunch of kids were out on the grounds on a ropes course. A rumor went out that one of the individuals had a gun, but no weapon was found. I don't think they had a gun. The group was nonetheless difficult to detain and were reportedly shouting profanities at officers and being unruly.
So that sounds like somebody who was on drugs.
Potentially. Yeah, I could see it. Or it's like Lewis Carroll, like a lot of his stuff seems psychedelically influenced, but it might just be
Lewis Carroll?
Alice in Wonderland has a psychedelic. Everyone says, oh, it's like a trip, mushrooms and stuff in it. But it might just be that he was kind of out of his mind already, or he was, a particularly creative type, shall we say. And so it like vibes well with drugged out people, but
sure.
Yeah, it doesn't necessarily mean. Anyway, Grimes was on Sean Carroll recently. I guess I'm not going to play the whole thing, but it was Preposterous Universe, his podcast. And
I listened.
I mean, you did?
She talks really fast.
Yep. And he doesn't. And so you can't really speed it up for him. And yeah.
Kind of confusing.
Who might be called War Nymph. And I mean, she's not the first time. Like, she's big into. My point is, Musk and her are big into. This brings us back to the beginning, but they're big into the rationalist community. At least they're sort of canon at right now. The sort of stuff that rationalists have been talking about since like 2007, I think, maybe. But
you mean regarding AI?
Yes, specifically the AI stuff. And and Sean Carroll is the awkwardness of the interview came through when he disagreed with her about a lot of that stuff. It was sort of, he was like, tone it down on the whole, AI will replace us immediately. And I mean, maybe, I don't know, but I'm
kind of not how technology cycles work.
Right. And just motivation, like to come back to the panspermia thing. I mean, it might be a sufficiently advanced population or civilization might be unable to find it. It's like the only ones who continue are the ones who have a reason to continue, in part because you can kind of so it might be reaching the point of decadence, like Roman like civilization crumbled partly because they kind of ran out of crazy shit to do. I think there's the Douglas Adams quote. I don't want to screw it up, but civilization stages.
Douglas Adams.
Oh yeah, he wrote The Hitchhiker's Guide to the Galaxy. The
Hmm.
history of every major galactic civilization tends to pass through three distinct and recognizable phases. Those are survival, inquiry, and sophistication, otherwise known as the how, why, and where phases. For instance, the first phase is characterized by the question, how can we eat? The second by the question, why do we eat? And the third by the question, where should we have lunch? In the sense that, like, there's kind of a, at first you're just trying to get food because you're going to die otherwise, and then you're kind of like analyzing why, how, why did we, what need did we have for this food. It's fascinating, all our biology. And then at the end it's just kind of like where to next, while we figured it all out, which they never do, but you know, it sort of feels like you do. You're kind of, there's not, you run out of room to explore, I think is the idea.
Right.
But there is it's a little like the where the Reavers come from in did you ever watch Serenity? The show Serenity?
No.
Oh. It's sort of like at the fringes of the galaxy or solar system? Solar system. It's never, the scales are never quite right in sci-fi like space shows, but like at the fringes there was this sort of attempted utopia where people, I think they were drugged to the point where they would all, everything was happy, they were happy all the time, and then they eventually just, wherever they stood, they just died. They just kind of chose to just end, except for 2% of everywhere, and those people turned into insane cannibals that roved the galaxy, fucking and raping everything that they find. And so the idea, I think, was sort of civilization is a step, and then there are failure modes abound in that domain. Once you're kind of, you feel like you're on top. I mean, the British Empire is sort of also, it's all the big empires that had, you know, where you run out of room to explore, or you with Rome, you kind of it just, the cities as a coordinating influence on the rest of the population, they become increasingly weak, and kind of the idea of inbred, kind of like I don't know, it's just seems to be a trend. And then you maybe have that at multiple scales, and that goes back to the ancient astronauts thing, where you might have had like other civilizations far away. What would their reason be for like why would they come and fuck with farmers, random hillbillies in on Earth? And if those are the ones, usually it's people out in a field somewhere where there's no witnesses. Those are the ones who end up seeing aliens. But then I don't know, maybe they have some reason. Maybe there's some you know, significance to, I'm just talking to a screen. Oh boy.
Yeah. Lieutenant Drebin, police squad.
Oh, I remember you, Drebin. What do you want?
I want to ask you some questions. You familiar with that face?
I don't know. My memory ain't so great.
Oh, yeah? Maybe this will refresh your memory.
I don't know. It's still kind of hazy.
How about this?
Yeah, I remember him. I used to see him around. Why do you want to know?
I can't tell you that.
Well, maybe this will help.
I really don't think I should.
Yeah, you still don't think so?
All right, his name is Nordberg. He's a cop.
He was no cop. He was dealing H.
What?
I'm telling you, he was dirty.
Are you? I ought to run you in right now.
All right. He worked at Ludwig Shipping. He tried to push something on one of my boys. I swear it. So what are you going to do about it, copper?
What should I tell you?
Maybe this will help.
I still don't think I should tell you.
Can you spot me?
Can you hear me?
Yes, I can hear you.
Okay.
Oh, Grimes. Grimes at a chalkboard.
She was nuts, dude.
on the
I've never seen anybody just talk that fast.
That's she.
I don't understand.
Fits well with the rationalists. It's a kind of a let's see, Grimes.
I don't like.
Um,
She like. It seemed like she.
what's it, Dune. She has a whole album. Yeah, JD Primes or whatever.
I think isn't bad.
What? Her music? Yeah.
No,
This
it's not
was
bad.
in 2010. She's young.
How long did she date Elon for?
Are they still dating?
I don't think they're still dating, but they dated for a while, right?
Grimes and Usk. Grimes details the difficulties of dating Elon Musk in a Wall Street Journal interview.
Oh
no!
God, dude.
Oh, let's see the dirt. Let's see it.
Not do that. That's ridiculous.
Oh no! Anyone who's a celebrity, we should just dig up all their personal stuff. That's how it works. I mean, he's a
The Wall
super
Street Journal is
interesting
basically a tabloid now.
Yeah, and isn't it owned by Bezos? Wait, this isn't the
No.
in a Wall Street Journal interview. Yeah. Isn't it? Wait.
The Washington.
Maybe I'm thinking of Washington Post. That's all right. That just shows how much I
care. It seems like you don't really pay
yeah.
attention to politics much.
No, I get the occasional like I kind of dropped out after the last clusterfuck that we survived through in 2016.
Wow.
But, well,
not as interesting as having Trump run. That was just like really interesting.
I mean, he's gonna have to run again.
Yeah,
this time he's just gonna run as the incumbent.
I feel like we've had him for long enough now that it's just like, okay, it's just Trump being Trump. Before it was like, oh my God, is he gonna do it?
Said that.
Is he actually gonna pull this off?
He did. For whether it be Russians or social media or did you see the Sacha Baron Cohen social media speech? He did.
Yeah, that was annoying.
Why so? The greatest propaganda machine in history. I mean, does it count as propaganda if it's us? We are the problem. Isn't propaganda, I don't know, isn't it supposed to be from another external? This is their video. You're not going to show him talk about it?
Propaganda machine.
During his speech, he called out the role big tech companies play in spreading unchecked content.
And violence is being facilitated by a handful of internet companies that amount to the greatest propaganda machine in history.
He shat on the Zuck.
I don't think most people want to live in a world where you can only post things that tech companies judge to be 100% true. We can either continue to stand for free expression, or we can decide that the cost is simply too great. And I'm here today because I believe that we must continue to stand for free expression.
Okay, Zuck.
That is ludicrous. This is not about limiting anyone's free speech. This is about giving people, including some of the most reprehensible people on earth, the biggest platform in history to reach a third of the planet. Freedom of speech is not freedom of reach. Under this twisted logic, if Facebook were around in the 1930s, it would have allowed Hitler to post 30-second ads on his solution to the Jew.
That's so ridiculous.
He was also democratically elected. I mean, you could argue like the lying press of the Jugend press was on his side. Well, were they?
Dude,
I don't
so
know.
Ridiculous. Like Facebook would not like
Allow Hitler to. I mean, they.
No.
I remember a refugee resettlement worker telling me about a person they had met years before and who looked them up on like YouTube or on Facebook, and they ended up basically as soon as they friended him, they saw their full profile. It was just ISIS stuff, like pro ISIS. And it's kind of like, it might be that when we're coming together, you
Wait,
see
you
a
kept
lot of this
talking that entire time?
Oh yeah, I just now, yeah. Did it cut out?
No, but I like went to help my sister or something. You didn't even see me.
I didn't even notice. Well, I had this. Oh God, I had this screen up. I gotta pull you over to here. Awkward. When you ran off, I could have
Anyway, go
played
on.
more video. Pay money, Wubby. Okay, so the Sacha Baron Cohen thing happened. This was funny. It's the wind. People getting hurt, but not that badly. That's funny.
Wait, but the Sacha Baron Cohen thing is pretty ridiculous.
Indeed. Did you just say that and then get up and walk away?
No.
I went off on a whole rant.
No, because we're talking about the whole like comparison to like Nazi. The point is that Facebook doesn't condone like threats of violence and things like that. They just like a politician might make a claim that's not like accurate, and they don't want to have to be responsible for flagging it. But that's different than being like, okay, I am Adolf Hitler, and this is my final solution.
I don't know if he was talking about it that early. I mean, he was really anti-Semitic early on, but he wasn't like, I'm going to kill them all. So
no, sure, but my point is like, you can't use the threat of like authoritarianism to just censor everyone. You can't do that. You become the authoritarian.
Yeah, it's the paradox of tolerance. It's actually
no, but the paradox of tolerance is different. Like, if somebody is saying like, I am going to do X, that's one thing. But if they're not doing that, like if Trump has ads about healthcare, like, should you just tolerate him because of his border policy? I mean, like, censor him because of his border policies as well? I don't think I get the paradox of tolerance, but that's when we're talking about like ISIS or something. You know?
But what's the? I mean, the thing is, I mean, it may be used to seem more clear cut because maybe the only voices internationally that would make it through had already been vetted so much by these institutions that they were. Although you still have like, what was the Rambo movie? Was like dedicated to the Mujahideen. Have you seen that?
Oh no way.
Yeah, let me pull that up. All right. Rambo 3. Okay, well that's not so big a deal.
What year was this?
God, 1970. Oh, 80. Okay, 80. Let me find this film is dedicated to the gallant people of Afghanistan. Oh yeah, they changed it. That's it's dedicated to the brave Mujahideen fighters of Afghanistan. No.
No? The Mujahideen not so brave anymore?
Yeah, well, it went at the time, we wanted to defeat the Soviets. It was still 1988. They were still a thing, I guess. I don't know. And yeah, so that happened. That's a real thing. Original ending of Rambo 3. It's like a real, I mean, I've seen Rambo 3. It's at the end. And it's kind of awkward how that stuff ages, but I think that Robert Maxwell ended up in a bunch of there's like media that let's see, Robert Maxwell in popular culture. It was James Bond, right? Was it James Bond? 1997, Tomorrow Never Dies. Robert Maxwell. Let's see, James Bond. He's been portrayed in fiction a bunch of times because he was, a mysterious figure who wrecked whole countries and stuff. But anyway, it's funny how that stuff ages, isn't it? Yeah. Oh, he's just a little movie villain. Oh, and then the guy from the literal guy who played Voldemort was on Epstein's plane.
Oh my god,
One of the,
dude,
one of the.
the best timeline.
It really how does all this happen? There's someone whose name like Reality Winner. Did everyone just? You remember that?
I don't know.
It's exactly. I don't know either.
Oh my
A
god.
former American intelligence specialist in 2017, she was charged with removing classified material from a government facility and mailing it to a news outlet. Her name is Reality Lay Winner, and it has been that since she was born.
Reality what?
Winner.
Wait.
WINNER.
Wait,
That happened.
wait.
Thank you for that's the correct response.
Wait, so there's somebody named Reality
His
Winner.
name is Reality Winner
What did they
and was hired by the NSA.
to do what?
She was like an analyst. There's a bunch of intelligence specialists. That was her. Employed by the military. Okay, so she was employed by a military contractor, Pluribus International Corporation. Winner was arrested on suspicion of leaking an intelligence report about Russian interference in the 2016 United States elections in the news website The Intercept. Her name. What is going on? Who's fucking with the timeline? Someone with a weird sense of humor.
I don't know. It's the superposition.
Yeah, it's the Tommy Westphal universe hypothesis. You know about that the whole universe is actually just happening in the mind of one autistic child. Because the Tommy Westphal universe hypothesis makes the claim that not only does the show Saint Elsewhere take place within Tommy's mind, because at the very end is some obscure show in I don't know, decades ago, that this autistic kid was like watching the TV, and I guess it drifts away to the end. So it gives basically it looks like the whole thing happened in this one kid. He hallucinated the show. But the problem is there's people in that show that connect to other fiction. So there's overlapping canons, and then you just get this explosion of every show that's featured anyone in every other show. It becomes this hypothesis was really but so do numerous other television series which are directly and indirectly connected to Saint Elsewhere through fictional crossovers and spin-offs, resulting in a large fictional universe taking place entirely within Tommy's mind. But anyway, that's the principle of explosion. You can just kind of once you got one contradiction in there. No, I mean it's probably that either that highly improbable events just happen because there's a lot of events and we can't guesstimate probabilities well, or there's always the possibility that the things with more influence on whether or not all of consciousness remains or ends, so things with an influence on like nuclear attack and stuff like that, they have an anthropic effect. So like for example, if you were hovering your hand over the button that started the nuclear war that ended all consciousness, that would just end all life on Earth, then if we are in fact the only life in the universe, or if there's some regional component to this, then you're effectively, it's the same as the Schrodinger's cat was as kind of a it's a way of avoiding the kind of disturbing part of quantum suicide, because everyone acknowledges, or most people acknowledge, that a cat is conscious on some level. And so if a cat is conscious, you can do Schrodinger's cat, and you can have a whole thought experiment where something is both alive and dead without ever having to think about what if the gun was aimed at you or the poison was aimed at you. Because it's like you only really have your window into the universe. You just, everything else is a screen or another person telling you something. And so in theory, there's if you set the gun up aiming at you, and whenever the radioisotope would go off, the gun would shoot you, then
your consciousness would be transmorphed to the next
universe where that didn't happen.
Right.
That would be so the idea then would be, no matter how improbable, it still wouldn't happen. You shouldn't test it, because then you just end up dead in most people, the vast majority of universes, I suppose, cardinality notwithstanding or what have you. But then apply that on a large scale to all living beings, and you may end up with some weird tendencies towards irregularity and probability when you have a highly influential world line. So people, as soon as you end up running Russia during the Cold War or something, suddenly things start being weird, around, like very improbable things start happening. Because if they didn't,
totally.
it's a very, I mean, there's no Bayesian, there's no way to look at the
There's
past and
no
say,
actual Bayesian context that makes it more probable than not.
right. Oh, okay. So there's basically Bayesianism as a philosophy wouldn't be able to apply to something like this. You couldn't use your past experiences of
That's
the universe
correct.
as
Yeah.
And so it's a little more on the Taleb side of things, where it's kind of avoiding catastrophe is maybe like if you set up a universe where catastrophe is improbable in the strictest sense. What do you say?
I haven't followed Taleb much, but you say a lot of things about him, and apparently he said, like Weinstein was talking about him, but apparently he's just like obnoxious or something.
Extremely. It's fat. He has fuck you money, and so he says fuck you a lot. It's pretty.
Really?
It's kind of wonderful. I'm glad. It's like.
How did he make it?
Hedge fund.
Yeah,
he's an actual finance guy, and so he basically says. It's like I was saying before about if you have a large institution, it can survive the uncle moments more readily, or it can. That's not quite the way to put it. It's more like the house always wins in the long term, but let's see, how can I best explain this? Basically, everybody assumes that in finance they assume that things that are mostly based on the past histories of a particular company and how frequent is a big drop in price or rise in price, those there's an assumption that those tend to be Gaussian, and then it turns out they actually tend to be power law distributed. And if you look at the power law, you basically
what do you mean by Gaussian versus power law distributions?
So basically you end up with a higher probability of extreme events than would be guesstimated by looking at just extrapolating out. Say you only have a history of 3 years,
sure.
And so you end up with
like Michael Blurry. That was what he was betting on.
Who's that?
The guy from The Big Short.
Oh, right. That's the thing. Taleb says you just have to set your system up so that when the next catastrophe happens that isn't being anticipated by the system, that you'll not necessarily benefit but won't suffer as much as everyone else.
Yeah, but that's painful.
Oh yeah, in the moment it means like crazy rituals and all sorts of weird things that don't make sense that actually put you behind a lot of people in the short term,
and it makes a lot of other people talk shit about you. And
and say those weirdos over there doing, they won't eat pigs. Why won't they eat pigs? And then everybody ends up with fucking some parasite that So
right.
That's maybe one example, but I had a Taleb thing up. Where did I put it? Yeah. So would you agree? Clearly can democracy by definition, the majority, tolerate enemies? The question is as follows. Would you agree to deny the freedom of speech to every political party that has in its charter the banning of the freedom of speech? Let's go one step further. Can a society that is elected to be tolerant be intolerant about intolerance? And this is, in fact, the incoherence that Kurt Gödel, the Grand Master of Logical Rigor, detected in the Constitution while taking the naturalization exam, which is the worst time to say I found a flaw in the Constitution, is when you're taking your test to become a citizen. Legend has it that Gödel started arguing with the judge, and Einstein, who was his witness during the process, saved him. So it is a real paradox. I know you weren't talking about it before, but it is a
I think it is a paradox. I just don't think it applied in the situation we're talking about.
We were talking about
paradox of tolerance is like a really old political philosophical issue. Like the guy who formalized it was this philosopher named Karl Popper.
Mm-hmm.
And I mean, it's
the one who did
it's like a big thing with communism in the United States.
Popper, the structure of scientific revolutions.
Yeah, he was Soros
guy.
Soros loved him, actually.
Just read him a lot, and
I think he taught Soros at LSE, London School of Economics.
Yeah,
Soros wanted to be a philosopher. but he just like
Soros.
made dollars instead.
Okay, yeah. Instead, he just raked in the dough.
Yeah,
Just like Les
sold
Wexner.
out. You know, start your own hedge fund.
Yeah, totally.
Hmm.
Make piles of money.
Yeah, that's how you do it. Or you can do the Brock Pierce route and just like go all in on Bitcoin and Ethereum. Who's a billionaire from Bitcoin and Ethereum, dude? Like, fuck that guy. What the fuck?
And that's the only shifty thing about him. It's definitely just that he put all that money in the Bitcoin thing and not
Nothing at all.
yeah. The strange saga of Jeffrey Epstein's link with Brock Pierce. I just searched for Brock Pierce, man. I didn't even.
Oh my god.
Oh boy.
I don't even. It doesn't even mean anything anymore though, because Jeffrey Epstein literally knew everyone. Like, there's not a famous person who isn't like, oh yeah, I saw him at a party once. Not one.
I mean, well, it's part of it's Ghislaine was actually she's the one who connected him to everyone, and then it was more like he had this he appeared then to have this extraordinary ability to bring together all these intellectual folks.
Yeah, sure. But my point is, like, however it happened, like pretty much anybody who's accomplished anything over the past 30 years is connected to this guy.
Well, I mean, Penrose
somewhat
connected to him, to my knowledge.
No,
Rodney
not literally everybody, but
okay,
it's like 90% or 80% or something.
Do you think Bezos has any connection to?
Bezos doesn't seem like he goes to parties.
And what about what about Prince? Whatever the one that isn't the one that was hanging out with Epstein all the time. Like I mean,
Prince who? Oh, Andrew? No, but that guy's clearly a perp. So there's different, like there.
That guy's clearly a perp.
I mean,
there's like, on that interview?
Like, I saw him at a party once, which it seems like a lot of these people did, and like I went to his island all the time because he had like really interesting things to show me there every time, but it totally was the fucking
like the Bill Clinton dress picture.
Yeah. Oh, what? Yeah, it's so weird.
You know what I'm talking about?
So weird. So
it's a little more than weird.
Oh my god.
They found the model from the picture. It's this guy. This man is the model behind Epstein's Bazaar, which I'm sure that was just published to be like, Bill wasn't in the dress, but it's like the blue dress thing is what, isn't that what Bill came on with the Monica Lewinsky stuff?
It's so funny how he came out and he was like, oh, I only met Jeff 4 times. Like, nah, we have the flight logs, bro.
Yeah.
That would be 13. But the media is like clearly just like, nah, nothing happened.
Why didn't you say anything before about the Trump did?
Yeah,
Trump,
how
Epstein,
about
2015.
what's the name of the guy from who was at BBC? Like the main guy at BBC was a pedophile.
Oh, the Jimmy Savile.
Jimmy Savile. It was like 400 and something cases, like accusations against him.
This he ran it like a mafia since the 40s. He'd been doing that. He was before Cosby, who, by the way, lived across the street from Jeffrey Epstein.
This is the BBC, the British Broadcasting. Like,
yes.
You know,
this is what I'm telling you about old empires. They fall apart, and some fraction just turns into reavers. But let me find the CPAC. Here we go. Is this Epstein guy? I love him. He's great.
Nice guy. Got a lot.
He's asked about Bill Clinton.
Nice guy. Got a lot of problems coming up, in my opinion, with the famous island with Jeffrey Epstein. A lot of problems.
That was in 2015.
Yeah, dude. Trump knows what's going on. You think Trump didn't know? Do you think Trump did not have sex with children? There's no way, right?
Let's just go with no comment. I don't want to get angry letters from the 15 people who will watch this. But yeah, no. Well, here's the thing. He's also gonna die, and I hope that when people kind of get up there and they're like, oh, I'm not going to be frozen, or maybe I will, but it's like they don't trust any of that stuff. Maybe they're kind of like trying to atone, or that's the hope anyway. Or maybe he's just a fucking deep state plant. But yeah, it's kind of a big nightmare. Anyway, so qualia computing.
Yeah.
Read that much? Yeah.
Dude, quality computing school. Hey, Aaron, how you doing?
Huh?
Was
What?
that Aaron?
Where? Someone behind me?
Yeah, well, I just heard somebody say read that much.
Oh, that's me. Do you read qualia computing that much? I heard it.
Every now and
there
then
was
Andreas
someone.
posts-
I think he walked by, but
Every now and then Andreas posts like an article that he writes on quality computing.
oh, Andreas,
Andreas Emilson.
not Andre.
Yeah, but I don't really like go on there to read stuff. It's pretty interesting though. David Pierce,
mean-
that's a cool dude.
It's nice that they got together. Like, it's no longer just the University of Arizona's Consciousness Institute or whatever is the only ones talking about this sort of thing, because like it is kind of someone should be repeatedly asking the question just to remind scientists, like, hey, by the way, this is all still going on. We don't have any good explanations. Everybody seems to be, it's like that, blind people describing an elephant or whatever. It's always whatever sort of corner of the universe they're in, like Tononi, integrated information theory.
A lot of people really don't like integrated information theory.
Well, yeah, it's
like it's kind of one of those ones where like the people who disagree with it are kind of, they really don't like it.
Yeah, often it's because they're also trying to explain the same thing, or often it's like string theory, where sometimes it'll encroach on someone else's domain and say, well, we can explain that in our model, and then
but they like I feel like quantum physicists don't necessarily like have spite for string theorists or string theory necessarily.
Oh, there's some that do.
There's some that do.
Some that are pretty critical of it. Where's what's her name? She's German lady. It'll come to me, but
I feel like QM has really made a comeback. In the 90s, it was all about string theory, but I feel like I don't hear people, maybe it's just Carol.
Well, no, string theory is still talking about. I mean, it's just another way of trying to explain incorporate the standard model and then explain what we haven't already explained about the universe. It's quantum
Well, I know
mechanics.
it's another where quantum mechanics is included in string theory. It's just a lower level.
I probably shouldn't be talking about this stuff as much because it's not really an area of expertise.
Are they not mutually exclusive?
They're not exclusive at all. Yeah, no.
I didn't know that.
It's that the testability of string theory. So
it's just so far from like.
Typically, people when they like funding boards, people on trying to they're not specialists in string theory. They're just choosing how much money do we put towards, and they're often just straight up picturing like a Minkowski world line as the string. It is totally not related to like the idea of a particle in force space. That is a string as well. That is a string like thing. But the string theory is talking about vibrational modes, and then there's sort of particular levels of those modes. These are big mathematical structures that they'll create, and then those structures will say, okay, this particular corner of it will explain this strange phenomenon, some asymmetry that's found between particles when you collide them, and that sort of thing. And it still has to incorporate what we already have of physics. And then each new thing that's discovered or tested. The problem is a lot of these sort of interpretations of quantum mechanics or attempts at coming up with like a mathematical model for everything. A lot of them they're decided by like the limits of current experiment.
Right.
And there's a structure to that. It's like who gets funded, how much. I mean, in the case of string theory, we came up with, there's a theory that was a framework that's been come up with that direct tests of it require a particle accelerator that's the size of the solar system, or I mean, that's literally the energies involved. You can't curve around. It's pretty straightforward, or not straightforward, but almost, because it's so darn big. But like
So that's like Kardashev type 3 civilization.
Sure, in order to test it directly.
Yeah.
And at that point, they'll go, "Oh, we finally fucking disproved it." All right, fuck. So, I would tend towards a more inconsistent, perhaps inconsistent framework that incorporates pieces from different models. That so it's sort of like that, talking about the anthropic principle is totally available. It's not available to string theory. String theory is one of many attempts at completely distancing the self from understanding the rest of the universe. But then the limits there, then it's like, oh, it's sort of like, how big and fancy of a model can I come up with that is so big and fancy that it can't be tested by the civilization I'm in the midst of in my lifetime. Which is kind of, it's not to say that's the only defining factor. It's also what industrially is available and that sort of thing, and how many resources can you get together. But ultimately, it's similar. I see similar trends. I saw similar trends in anthropology years ago, that where you would end up with kind of, okay, we can't sequence DNA past older than a certain age, so we can just come up with whatever bullshit. Spandrels are the thing that I mentioned before, but whatever evolutionary one bottleneck that just happened, and suddenly everyone in the world is descended from that. I guess we just killed off everyone else. It's like a weird Adam and Eve thing. Who did they have kids with? Like, but yeah. Anyway, it's like I don't remember who said this, but it's like the end limits of rationality are to determine. The point of rationality is to determine its own limitations, or to like eke out all that can be rationally explained, and then you're at the point that can't be. And then, so what do you do then? Your whole framework is rationality. And so, like Michael Shermer, what do you do when Epstein happens? And, yeah, but anyway, we don't have to talk about string theory. It's fine.
I mean, no, it's cool. I know I have a friend who's like, the main type of math he does is like proving string theory, and that's not like a good explanation of it, but that's how he explains it, so that regular people can understand it. But I don't know, it's just so crazy. I feel like I'm just starting to
my YouTube
to understand, and nobody really understands quantum mechanics, but just like having some sort of framework to be able to talk about it well.
Yeah. It's a little bit, it reminds me a little bit of with Taleb talking about what you don't know. And in fact, quantum mechanics, it's always the corner of the physics department where like the people studying it intensely are a little wacky. And it's like this sort of shameful almost corner, because in an academic framework, you're just speaking to a bunch of people and then hearing their ideas, and then you speak to them, and then you sort of go back and forth. Like when you're teaching people about it, and it's like, you can totally teach people about quantum mechanics, but then the thing you teach them is the limits of certainty, which it's like, well, then they're like, wait, there's this domain where like everything else I've learned in this area is how do you get really certain about where this block will fall, where this rock will go. And this is the exact opposite of that. You're defining all this stuff that if you could know it, you'd fuck with the rules. And actually then there'd be this whole other domain of uncertainty. And yeah. So
the cool thing about it is, unlike a lot of the other hard sciences, I feel like to truly understand the limits, you have to do philosophy.
Yeah. It's quantum foundations essentially just sounds like philosophy.
Yeah.
It ends up. That's Sean Carroll said it was like the most embarrassing thing about physics right now is that there's all that if you poll physicists, you'll still end up with this range of opinions on like Copenhagen and all these different, and then like
Right.
orchestrated objective reduction, which is like, and then those people all end up having gone to Epstein Island except for Penrose. So who's the one who's actually? I stand by. That's a good litmus test for how trustworthy a physicist is which then I think not Sean Carroll, but the guy, the quantum mechanic at MIT, Seth Lloyd. There's photos of him hanging out with Epstein and stuff, but it's like Weinstein knowing Epstein, where.
But I was just
right.
saying,
I know
like,
not everyone
is all roads lead to Epstein. Like the fact that this,
except for Penrose's.
Like the fact that you just took that to Epstein is pretty amazing.
Is well, and I think, I don't know, their worldviews and how their science shapes their worldviews. The fact that those aren't separable may have somewhat. And let me give you one good example. Everett, not Everett Washington. Oh, what was his name? Physicist. I'm pretty sure he killed himself or he drank himself to death. But this is Hugh Everett of the Everett interpretation. And he had a pretty fucked up, and his daughter killed herself and like left it. But basically, Everett, at the age of 51, Everett, who believed in quantum immortality, died suddenly of a heart attack at home in his bed on the night
Everett believed in quantum immortality, really?
Mm-hmm. Yep. And it's yeah. His obesity, frequent chain smoking, and alcohol drinking almost certainly contributed to this. Although he seemed healthy at the time, a committed atheist, he had asked would his remains be disposed of in the trash after his death. He asked that his remains. Yeah, his wife kept his ashes in an urn for a few years before complying with his wishes. About Hugh's death, his son, Mark Oliver Everett, later said, blah, blah, blah. I was mad that my dad didn't take care of himself, blah, blah, blah. His daughter died by suicide in 1996, saying in her suicide note that she wished her ashes to be thrown out in the garbage so that she might end up in the correct parallel universe to meet up with daddy. Yeah. So I feel like that's good evidence that it's not to say that the influence one's worldview has on them is any reason to not have, like, there's totally, you can take on a one or another worldview. It's just in the end that's kind of,
I mean, like Jordan Peterson is right that certain beliefs do serve you differently.
Mm-hmm.
But I don't know, the whole idea of like adapting a belief so that it can serve me a certain way seems pretty ridiculous.
See, it seems deceiving. It's like you're deceiving yourself almost, or like
I would do that.
You're
like,
fucking with your own perception of reality. I don't know. It's problematic, we'll say. Certainly,
I can see how just like thinking. I mean, many worlds essentially. It's hard to think that. First of all, just like the size of the universe and the arrow of time, and just how long things have been around, makes it hard to believe that there is objective meaning to life.
Right.
But then you create like a Hilbert space of parallel universes.
Well, I think, and Aaron said this before too, but it's like, okay, let's say all that's true. So what? It's still ultimately the meaning still can't come from without. That's the kind of, like, it can't, even in like, that's why Rick is always so depressed in Rick and Morty.
Yeah,
he can travel to every universe and he lives forever, blah blah blah. But he's still, it's like, okay,
it's like, all right.
Yeah, it's and I think actually Penrose has an interesting approach to that may actually, I mean, the idea of
he and Carol need to talk. Like,
I fucked up. I fucked up last podcast, and I actually cited this at the bottom. They did. They did talk. They talked in January. That was my bad. I didn't remember it. Okay. I think I heard it, but then they just disagreed about quantum brains, and it almost. I mean, there was
what was the basis of the disagreement?
I see it was in January. I don't remember. Things
Okay,
are
I'll have to
happening so
listen
fast.
to it again.
And Penrose. Let's see if there's some breakdown anywhere. But they did talk. I was hoping they would. I mean, the thing is even Penrose is unwilling to talk about, like, there'll be the God podcast with, evangelical Christian, Bob Herbert or whatever, and he'll talk to Roger Penrose, who has a theory of the universe that blah, blah, blah. But Penrose himself is never like, the quantum mechanics says that Jesus. He's never.
Yeah, of course not.
Like, yeah, he's a real physicist. That's but the thing is,
But he just says there's something else, and measurement may not be
right.
like,
He says there has to be some extension to quantum mechanics. We don't have a good, and it's consciousness is the reason for that extent. That's the part where he loses all the people who are established. He loses.
Wait. Say that again.
He says that there's probably something beyond our current understanding of quantum mechanics, and that's so he's got sort of three
tied
big
to consciousness specifically.
Yes, it's tied to his orchestrated objective reduction stuff, but it's and his explanations for this are it's like a collection of assumptions that are then put on top of a collection of assumptions, but they're all the types of well-informed assumptions that a mathematician makes or a mathematical physicist. So you end up with what?
But it's just not simple.
Not his framework isn't simple because he's trying to bridge from our current understanding. So like he would cite this paper by like a Japanese guy and an Indian fellow that was, I think it was a test of microtubule ballistic conductance. So it's not quite superconductivity, but it's a property that's found, I think, in carbon nanotubes, and that is unquestionably, non-trivially quantum mechanical. And you can test a single microtubule, which is a thing found not just in the brain, but in cells everywhere, amoebas, things all over the world, organisms. It's it's the scaffolding of biology of the cell. These things called microtubules.
Yeah, no, I know what microtubules are.
They're a highly structured thing, and because of that, like, that's where you tend to find the quantum mechanical phenomena in biology. It's like something where it'll wiggle, so it has a thermal element to it, but that's not disrupting whatever non-classicality is there.
Right.
Because that wiggle happens under certain constraints, where you then can have a superposition of many different states and like this lipid cell wall type. I mean, plant photosynthesis, gecko foot adhesion. It's anywhere where if you're going to have room temperature quantum mechanics, the reason that we think of quantum mechanical phenomena as being small and cold is because the systems we could set up. What?
Cold? I wouldn't think
cold. Yeah, no, that's all the quantum computers right now. They're always freezing everything.
I see.
Yeah. And that's because like the systems we set up with our particular level of industrial society, those end up being the types of systems that the only way to get them down to the reduction in degrees of freedom, where like, if you're multiverse type thing where it hasn't quite diverged into multiple multiverse threads, there's a wave function representing a whole collection of states. The systems where you can reduce their degrees of freedom down like that are the cold and tiny systems. But that doesn't mean that those are the only systems with enough of a reduction in degrees of freedom in some independent, collection of vectors or whatever that you can have a quantum. It doesn't mean those are the only ones that can have some entanglement or tunneling or all the sort of standard. I don't want to say classical but standard quantum sort of resources. And so you end up with all these weird mixed states and things like so ballistic conductance is where superconductivity, typically if it's going to happen in a metal, in a crystal, then it's going to be really fucking cold. It's got a neodymium or niobium, and then they cool it way down, and then you can put a current in a loop, and the current will just keep going forever. It's actually the whole state is there's Cooper pair things that happen with the electrons. But the point is that you get quantum locking where things will hover and all sorts of weird shit. Because there's discrete energy levels that'll show up in whatever domain. If you have a loop of metal, you're moving it. But it doesn't necessarily mean that the only systems that can get like that are in fact, we've demonstrated already that there are a bunch of these systems that specifically make use of quantum phenomena. So in the case of microtubules, they ballistically conduct, and they are warm and wet and noisy. It's the phonons.
What do you mean by ballistically conduct?
So, sorry, yeah, I didn't explain that. It's driven superconductivity. So you put a particular driving frequency. So it's not just like you have to keep a superconductor cold, so it's not really a perpetual motion machine.
Yeah.
Or a superfluid, liquid helium. You can make a fountain of liquid helium that'll just go forever, but you can't have a region of the universe that's that cold and doesn't constantly require some external source of violating thermodynamics. You're just sort of nestling up to the point where you're running into discretization error in the definition of thermodynamics in that region. And so ballistic conductance is I believe you put a current, driving current in at a particular frequency, and then you can, within a certain range of frequencies, you have superconductive behavior where something has zero resistance.
Yeah.
But it's only certain frequencies that'll have zero resistance.
Okay.
But still, you could construct a computing apparatus out of that. I mean, if anything, I don't know why it probably is being explored, but it's like, again, it comes back to that string theory thing. How do you sell that wacky idea to a group of like a board of trustees at a university to get them to? String theory is much more palatable, partly because it is actually, there's a string theory for dummies. You can actually there's a book called, you can convey it to people, and then also, you can at least convey like the overall ideas to a group of people who are trained in just standard physics or applied physics. You can still get the ideas across, and it even sounds palatable to the public because of the whole Minkowski space, Bohr space world line of particle draws a string. That's not string theory, but that is the thing most people think of when they think of string theory or when they're told about string theory, which is perfectly understandable. It's just this sort of annoying coincidence that's potentially why it gets so much support. You ask a string theorist, they'll hit you if you tell them that, but it's nevertheless, that's the impression I get. It's more like it satisfies these very artificial limitations of like the knowledge of the general public, the knowledge of a funding board, and then the physical limitations of our experimental apparatuses all over the world. Those three, and a couple other factors like ideological consistency to the average physicist or to a physicist who wants to pursue the big thing that gets all the funding, I'm going to be the next blah. That type of person, tends to be a palatable. It's like it's a never-ending kind of. You can keep explaining other areas of physics or even finance and stuff in terms of string theory, and so I say finance. Look, sorry, that's a bit of a stretch.
No. It's a stretch, but I get what you mean.
Black Scholes.
There are analogies.
Like Black-Scholes equation. Here's the thing: Black-Scholes and Schrodinger. So Black-Scholes in imaginary time is the Schrodinger's formula, the time-dependent one, I think. I'm not claiming to sit and have worked this out, but it's a Black-Scholes is how you compute. I believe it's based on its option pricing, right? And so it's how do past states represent current or where things are going to go. That's sort of let me see, on the interconnectedness of Schrodinger and Black-Scholes. And you can even do with a D-wave, you can do like portfolio management and stuff, because you're looking at big data sets where connections that may exist in those data sets could never be fully enumerated by a classical computer, but maybe there'll be a little low hum of a energy level representing that connection, some pattern basically that's pulled out of in the same way that like Shore's algorithm is using, there's this thing called modular exponentiation. So if you do like 2 to the n and then you do it modulo 50, you're going to keep getting, it's not really random, but you're going to keep getting something between 0 and 50 each time you do 2 to the n. But in order to get that next value, you have to do the full 2 to the n. You just then have to divide it by 50 and take the remainder, basically. And so you end up with there's certain beat patterns, recurring patterns in that particular sort of mathematical process, and figuring those out equates to just factoring numbers into primes and finding primes. In fact, that's the whole the frequency of primes is the non-trivial zeros of the zeta function have real part equal to 1/2 or whatever, negative 1/2.
Well, of course I don't know what you mean.
Sorry, now I'm rambling. But basically, it's like there's certain things that are in mathematics. I mean, all of mathematics is always there. It's always just there. It just hasn't been discovered yet or proved yet. Certain statements haven't, but it's still there. And so if you can a lot of the things in encryption are basically putting something way out that you can easily get there, but then sort of coming back requires proving that that's the particular hash of proving that that's the password associated with a hash. If the hash is plain text, or the hash is in the clear. Anyway, sorry. It comes down to prime number factoring, which is like a really fundamental part of mathematics, and yet, and you could remember I mentioned Kurt Gödel, right? We were talking about Taleb and Gödel. Well, like the thing that Gödel used to prove the either incompleteness or inconsistency of a particular system of logic, the thing he used to prove that was this thing called Gödel numbering. I think we might have talked about it before on the podcast, but it's basically assigning a unique number to every sayable statement in a particular system of logic. So, it's a bunch of symbols arranged in a string. And then you can make statements by factoring that number.
Wait, that's a lot of. He did that?
Yeah. Well, what he was doing, it becomes very computationally impossible to even take a really simple statement and encode it the way he did.
Yeah.
But the thing is he only had to show that a system like that existed, and that it was, you could uniquely describe every arrangement of symbols using basically. The idea is you take
that system itself couldn't describe itself.
Right. Well, that's what you end up with is you take you can it output its own, can it describe itself, or can it output its own axioms? And it ends up having a whole connection to the halting problem and all these. So like, will a system stop at a certain point? Well, if you have like a computer program, and then you have the compiler for that program, you have even the source code, there's proving that it's going to stop. I think it's like it just becomes equivalent to enumerating every possibility within that program. And actually, I mean, it's saying you can't prove it'll halt within. Anyway, the point is talking about when a thing stops becomes very. Although, actually, if you have a system that is, I think it's the non-deterministic. What is it? It's possible if you have a system where you can fuck up, where you can make mistakes, or have output that's somewhat inaccurate, then there actually aren't any proven statements about what that system can and can't prove. The problem just is that it's kind of like saying, like, there's all these things the media can do that I can't, like fly to Syria and tell me about terrible things happening there that I'm going to care about, and then donate money or vote for someone or something based on. And the media can do that really well, and I can't do that at all. But then the media is going to lie to me about when, the person owning that particular media institution is, Epstein Island when they come back to we're all back to the like ABC. They actually shut down the story, and that was the biggest story of this year, probably of the past decade, is that. And so you kind of like, who do I trust? Well, I can't just not listen to anyone. Okay, I guess I'll listen to the alternate views. Then some of them are Nazis and like, but yeah, you're just gonna get some of that. That's just whatever. But yeah, I went from Girdle but that Taleb talked about Girdle in the context of that. So yeah.
You read his book?
I read The Black Swan. I didn't read anything else. It was fascinating. He has all these characters that he'll bring up. Well, Black Swan is just talking about that, like the probability of these rare events that are nobody's talking about before they hit, and then but they have they tend to have severe impacts, these types of events, and so they'll kind of come out of nowhere, and it's like, how do you prep for something? Oh shit! I just heard a loud buzzing. But anyway,
That's kind of why I feel like there's not going to be a stock market crash, even though the fundamentals of the economic steps so many governments in the world are taking make no sense. I think there isn't going to be a huge crash because everybody understands it makes no sense. You know what I mean?
Whereas in past eras, when this
Yeah, like with the
approached this time,
2008 financial crisis, people assumed that the monetary policy we've been carrying out for since the Great Depression, essentially, since John Maynard Keynes, it had worked for the most part. Inject a little excess liquidity into the market during downturns. You don't have crashes. It worked for decades. So when everything else was happening, they were like, oh, housing, the Fed
solid, well, how could it possibly? It's a house, right?
But now, you look at
if your neighbors are all, you don't know them, and there's certain factors, but yeah. And
but
if you just have crazy people,
but now it's like, oh, the government just printed 20-something trillion dollars, and the prices of everything's totally inflated, and all the hedge fund managers are like, the stock market doesn't make sense. Everything is inflated. Nothing makes sense anymore. I feel like when that's the case, and the government's pretty much acknowledging that by just they see something happening and they just rush in and pump money in. Everybody's sort of expecting catastrophe. And I feel like what could happen could just be prolonged bullshit.
It's possible also, and not to assume some deistic, some sort of theistic qualities of the stock market here, but it's also possible that it may be everyone's going and the Louis bit. You can't just go forever, right? Eventually you're just I guess it won't blow up. But then once enough people are convinced it won't blow up, then it'll blow up. That seems like the Talebian.
So that's possible because everything all of this crazy stuff happening now, people are like, it's going to blow up, it's going to blow up. And then the socialists are like, no, it's modern monetary theory, which means the government can just print money when they want and do stuff. And at some point, they're probably going to start doing that. And that's going to be the accepted norm. And we've done it for 30 years.
You can't do that forever. I'm sure you can't do that forever. You'll run out of free. You can't just print it forever. Run out of electricity to represent it. It's not. And also, there's a whole mass of people whose money will be devalued.
The hypothesis is that the limit is actually the physical limit of value that we can create. So the limit on inflation isn't, because it's no longer backed by anything. People won't lose. They'll eventually just accept the modern monetary theory is a new paradigm, and then the limits of inflation will be okay, we've run out of natural resources to build stuff with. So if you keep pumping money, there's literally not more value. That
Okay.
yeah.
But then, so only then, if you keep pumping out money,
Yeah.
will it devalue all the other money? Is
Yeah.
that
Yeah.
so? Which
So
I
like
always just assumed it
the
just
global
happened.
assets are like 90 something trillion dollars. Presumably, if you make it like 20 something trillion, then it's like, okay, well, yeah. Unless we just go ahead.
I mean, so you're saying, because value is like it's kind of an ephemeral concept, right? It's whatever people are willing. Like the tulip thing was they were fucking tulips. That was what they were paying for. The value there was much like a housing market. It was set by the value that other idiots are willing to pay for that.
Salt.
And Bitcoin, the bubble there was a little bit like that. It was whatever other people are willing to pay for that.
There was like no reason for Bitcoin's price.
There wasn't. Not when it peaked. Except it was so Brock
There's no
Pierce
reason
could
for the price
could-
right now. Like what? Like why is the Bitcoin valuable?
Oh, well, I mean, partly it's probably that there's markets around the world, like national markets, that are destabilizing a bit, and then it is actually your only source of an economy locally.
So it's a hedge against like the general economy, I suppose.
If you're outside of those communities, it is. If you're inside of those communities in the world, then the value is that you know how many. It's a scarce and easily transferable resource outside of government control.
Right.
So if you're in some country where the economies collapse, so as more economies collapse, it'll become more valuable. That's the
right. But then it's still too volatile. I think.
Well, for day-to-day transactions, maybe not. Because I'm just thinking about people in
fair
like,
enough, but
Bolivia.
for day-to-day transactions is still pretty shitty, right? Super high transaction fees.
It depends on how much mining is going on at a given time. That's how much the fees are, right? So it's kind of like, how much are people anticipating it being worth something in the near future? That's going to determine in the moment. And so it's sort of supposed to self-correct. That's the idea. But
yeah. I guess if it's around long enough, like when Bitcoin is around for 100 years, it'll just be like, okay, well, we know what Bitcoin is, broadly speaking. It's crazy that it's only 10 years old.
Pretty wild. This is a super duper tism, like powerful tism. This is Sabine Hossenfelder. She's the German physicist I mentioned before.
Yeah.
But she
to talk about string theory. Not because I think that's so interesting, but because I think it's not interesting and I wish we could stop talking about it.
I love her.
It's an idea that dates back to the 1970s, and it was originally proposed as a way to describe the force that holds atomic nuclei together. This is known as the strong nuclear force, and it did indeed describe some of the observed behavior correctly. It turned out pretty quickly, though, that a different theory, which is now called quantum chromodynamics, was better at describing the observations. String theory, however, turned out to have different benefits. The idea of string theory is that all the particles are really made of small strings, and all the interactions between them are also exchanged by strings. This has the consequence that there is a universal force that is acting on all particles. Now, the only such universal force that we know of is gravity. And at the time, physicists were trying to combine gravity with the other forces in the standard model. And string theory seemed a very, very promising way to do this. This was in the 1980s, and it's the background on which, for example, Steven Weinberg wrote his book, Dreams of a Final Theory. They were thinking that they were close to combining all of the fundamental interactions into one theory of everything that string theory was supposed to be. However, it did not work out as planned. The first problem that appeared is that string theory only works in 9 dimensions of space. We've only seen 3. That brings up the question, well, what do we do with the other 6? The idea that string theorists came up with is that they curl up these additional dimensions of space to very small radii. Now, if you want to probe something that is very, very small, you need a high energy. So it might just be that we have not been able to produce energies high enough to probe these small additional dimensions. And that explains why we haven't seen them. The next problem that showed up in string theory is that it requires a new kind of symmetry, which is known as supersymmetry. Supersymmetry adds a partner particle to all of the known particles of the standard model. Problem is, we have not seen those particles. So what theorists suggested at the time is that the partner particles are much heavier than the already known particles. This breaks the symmetry, but it's something that you can do. And again, it explains why we haven't seen them, because it takes high energies to produce heavy particles. So we might just not have been able to build large enough colliders to see the supersymmetric particles. Making the supersymmetric particles heavy, however, did not entirely solve the problem with supersymmetry. That's because not only do you have these additional particles, but you also get additional kinds of interactions that were not seen. These are called flavor-changing neutral currents, and it was known already in the 1990s that those were not there. To fix that problem, theorists assumed that there's a new kind of symmetry on top of supersymmetry. This new symmetry is known as R parity, and it basically forbids these new kinds of interactions. So that made the theory compatible with the experiment again. Next problem that appeared is that sometime in the 1990s, astrophysicists went and measured the cosmological constant. String theory works best in a space with a negative cosmological constant. Unfortunately, the constant in our universe turns out to be positive. But well, it only took a few years and string theorists had come up with a fix for that problem. Another problem that appeared fairly early in string theory is that in contrast to the original hope, string theory does not uniquely combine the standard model with gravity. Instead, it has a huge number of different solutions, each of which has a different particle content and has different constants of nature. For this reason, theorists cannot actually use string theory to predict what particles we see in our universe and what are the constants of nature that we actually measure. Now, there are some string theorists who say that we can use string theory to predict what happens to information that falls into a black hole. Unfortunately, the calculations that they can actually do are for black holes that live, once again, in a space with a negative cosmological constant. And that's not the kind of universe that we actually live in. How to do the calculation for...
Why'd you pause it?
Oh, do you want to finish it?
Yeah.
Because I was going to open what you've got here, because basically it just goes on, and historically, this is totally just talking about the history of string theory. It just
So, like,
goes on and on like that.
Basically saying it's just a rabbit hole and it hasn't like led to anything legit.
Yes, that's what this appears to be. Yeah. Let me pull up.
But the whole thing
about
this
in the right.
The whole thing about
No,
like
no, I didn't.
a pervasive force, other than gravity, is kind of interesting.
Right. Well, I mean, so the synchronization between galaxies. There's either you've got some early state where there's some commonality. So this is recent. This is actually
this paper came out in October.
There's synchronization between like quasars, as I believe those are the galactic core ones. So this is a similar case.
But this is saying like this is at distances,
astronomical ones. Oh yeah,
beyond what gravity could impact, like 20 million light years.
Well, and so we're not talking about a force like gravity anymore. You're saying, I mean, there may be so you could have synchronization. Is this synchronization that formed over time? Because I'm talking about synchronization that we just notice. And it's like we only have a time scale. Usually we're seeing different things at different stages, and that's where you work out like, oh, this is how white dwarf will age and that sort of thing. But there's, in this case, I don't know how much of this you've read. The observed coherence may have some relationship with large-scale structures because it's possible. Right. So when they say coherence, they're just talking about statistical coherence. But I'm perfectly willing to say...
They're just saying they need more data. I just thought it was interesting.
Right. But, I mean, finding a symmetry of some kind that you didn't expect, especially when it's from something as chaotic as a galaxy, implies that there's either some unknown source of especially when it's a thing you assume is chaotic. the only explanation then is that they're synchronizing across vast distances by exchanging some information,
right,
or interacting
or
in some way.
or the initial parameters, let's say, or the initial conditions are such that they would maintain the coherence.
And that's the part, exactly. That's the part that it's like, if it's a truly chaotic system, which we have to assume, it's like the sun. Even the sun actually has a deep structure to it, where if tunneling, if I think proton tunneling or something like that, if tunneling didn't, or maybe I'm thinking protein interactions, but it's just called proton tunneling. If tunneling weren't a thing, so this is again where you got some system that's so something that it's got a reduction in the degrees of freedom, and in the case of the sun, it's stuff that's so compressed. Then you have, if you have a sufficient reduction in the degrees of freedom, you end up with quantum phenomena, and then you can have all this weird things like tunneling, which is the thing the sun uses partly to carry out fusion, at least at its core, and keep going. That then certainly quantum mechanical systems like superconducting stuff, you have this huge reduction in chaos. You actually have like quantum locking type stuff. You have the vortices that are created, the currents that are created in superconducting and superfluidic systems are actually not of the type that beget further vortices ad infinitum. Until you have an inevitable divergence in the, if you're going to talk about it in a multiverse sense, an inevitable divergence into like a completely unknowable, initial conditions can't decide the outcome in the long term. Wet thermal things tend to be the more wet and thermal, or the more warm and thermal, or
the less likely
they get.
Initial conditions will determine the outcomes to that.
Exactly.
Right.
And what gets weird is then when you look at things like quasars, where there's extreme regularity already, but regularity itself might be like, it's like that weather thing on one of Jupiter spot or something. There's one of the planets, maybe it's not that, there's one of the planets, or maybe it's one of the moons actually, has like it's like octagonal. It's a constant storm right around the surface on one pole. And it just looks an octagonal storm. Like, most of you think of a hurricane as truly chaotic, and weather is something you can't predict in the long term. But if it's remaining in this highly structured state, it's possible that highly chaotic systems have some, thresholds that they can fall into where they stay in a particularly structured state for a while, at least in some visible domain in that case. But the problem is that then when you're talking about astronomical scale stuff, quasars and pulsars I think are the star one, and then quasars are the galactic core one. When you have some regularity at that scale, then you have to come up with some new explanation for why does that one have a what's the waveform that from all the muck and the chaos that persists in a very regular fashion. And then when you have regularity across vast distances, then everyone just goes, fuck it, I have no idea. That seriously is for stuff like galactic, either there's some alignment going on. I would argue that you, just like a neutron star can kind of get explained in the context of an atom. It's like a gigantic, it's like the periodic table has just a huge gap where there's all these atoms that just could never exist. They're never going to fucking, because you don't have things of the particular forces involved in creating an atom. There's just not, those things will last for a split second in a particle collider, and then they'll vanish. Francium, or whatever is like just one of the isotopes that's like that. Well, apparently if you get to the point where gravity is involved, gravity's like, there's sufficient gravity in some area to pull these particles together so that the pressures they're under are leading again to some highly regular state, you get a neutron star, and you get a superfluid. A neutron star has a neutron superfluid, and I believe it's just a superfluid of one type. But it's the reason it's called a neutron star is it has similar densities to a neutron, or the collection of neutrons at the core of an atom. But then you have another, it's like a recurring, the periodic table had big gaps in it, and then you found a spot where, okay, this particular thing is barely radioactive, and so it'll last a long time. It's not very unstable. And then you get a bigger gap, and then it's like the Ackermann function, and then after 3 steps or 4 steps, it's suddenly the gap is so big that it's astronomical, literally astronomical, and you don't get another recurring atom-like thing where there's a giant quantum core to it until you get way out there. And that's far enough away that we can't sit and test it for, like, say, regularity in its electromagnetic fields, which would be the sort of thing that would lead to this like quasars lining up, you know, or synchronizing pulsars, and in this case, galactic stuff. And so those correlations imply something, some vast unknown, just completely untested stuff
that we need string theory for.
Right. I mean, we definitely need to be more open to a lot of stuff, and we aren't. Institutions are the opposite.
It's hard. Yeah, I mean, it's just like how, like, if institutions are too open, you lose a lot, right?
Yeah, that's true, but they aren't people. I don't care as much about their survival. I know there's certain institutions you'd want them to last as long as possible. A government in a stable democracy, that sort of thing. But like nothing lasts forever, man. Yeah, I know. But democracy has failure modes. Clearly, Liberia, you can tell that you can, and Germany in the 30s, you can have
not a panacea.
You can have democracy itself is a big clusterfuck. It's like the best clusterfuck we've come up with, but it can still it can be ultimately succumb.
I don't know that it's the best clusterfuck that we've come up with. I think it's
we've actually gotten going.
In certain situations, it's the best clusterfuck.
Right. Well, I guess Apple's probably better than Apple was fascist.
Yeah.
Internally run in a non.
I mean, in the context of a nation state, even.
It's probably worse though for right. I wouldn't want a nation to be fascist.
I don't know.
Don't. It's I mean, what you want is to maintain the power, the quick, response time when the next FEMA type event.
Sometimes
FEMA matters because there's
sometimes efficiency matters more than the downsides of power concentration.
Right.
Yeah.
And that's why a president is like, we just picked out the things that a king that was sort of the powers that a king had that we would like him to still have, like the using the military for a short span. It was supposed to be for a short span, and then it ended up, that's always what happens. I am the Senate, fucking take over. And I don't know anything about the Bush and Epstein. There's never been any sort of connections.
That's kind of weird.
Except actually, there's that painting. There's, you know what I'm talking about? Bush, painting, planes, Epstein. Check this out. So these are the two. Those are the two paintings. That the one is of Clinton with the dress that he was potentially blackmailed through, and then this one was also in Epstein's home in New York.
He's probably just having fun.
Yeah, where there's two piles of blocks and he's got planes, paper planes. This is why I'm like, they wanted us to. This is.
Oh God,
Jeffrey Epstein had a painting of George
Whoever
Bush.
created the universe has the darkest sense of humor ever.
That's the Le Demiurge meme that God's a dick.
He's just like, fuck it.
Oh my God. I mean, let's see. Le Demiurge. Let me see if I can find it. Yeah, the occult Reddit. That's Le Demiurge. So the Demiurge being the initiator of the universe, who is clearly a total cunt. Because have you seen the universe? Little babies get cancer. Babies get what?
I mean, that's like from a human perspective. From the perspective of like conscious creatures, like humanity requires a mass holocaust of cows.
Yep.
To survive.
You just gotta chew up cattle. Yeah.
I mean, think about how fucked up factory farming is. It's like You don't even think about it, but when you think about it, it's like beyond fucked up. I mean, it's like
It's so horrifying. I
Yeah.
mean, comparing it to the Holocaust is a little insulting to.
no, I don't.
I know,
I'm not.
but
comparing
it
to the
still
Holocaust.
it is a. If you were a cow, you'd feel differently.
Yes.
Especially a social cow that was able to comprehend the other organisms in your universe. Yeah. So this is actually a.
Smart pig, right? Because normal pigs are like. Yes. Sure. Yeah. I have to relocate.
All right.
Hold on one second.
I'm gonna play this video while you're relocating. You can just listen to it, I guess.
No, just wait.
Oh, okay. I see how it is.
Space with a positive cosmological constant, nobody really knows. Now, I told you that string theory contains gravity, and that's true, but it's not gravity the way that we know and like it. Instead, it's gravity plus a larger number of additional fields. And these additional fields would have played a role in the early universe, and they could also presently play a role for the expansion of the universe. Problem is, we have not seen any evidence for the existence of these additional fields. Now, again, you can make it work within string theory. You can come up with reasons why we have not seen these fields so far. But that's yet another assumption that has to enter the theory to avoid that it runs into conflict with experiment. Now, the newest problem that string theorists are discussing is that the fix that was supposed to solve the problem with the negative cosmological constant may not be working after all. Or maybe there's a problem with the problem for the fix of the problem. Well, whatever way it turns out, I'm pretty sure that string theorists will find a way to make observations compatible with their theory, because that's what they've been doing for the past 40 years. Now, those were a lot of negative points, and that's somewhat unfair because string theory has not been entirely useless. String theory has, for example, helped to prove certain theorems that relate abstract mathematical spaces, so it has made some contributions to mathematics. It is also the case that string theory is mathematically very closely related to quantum field theory. And quantum field theory is the kind of theory that we use for the standard model and also to describe large numbers of particles. In these areas, string theory may help solve certain problems that we have with doing the calculations on the quantum field theory. So far, this approach has not been terribly successful, but maybe one day it will be successful. Even if that is so, however, let us be clear that this would have nothing to do with string theory as an approach to a unified theory of the interactions and for quantum gravity. So string theory may once have been a promising approach to a theory of everything. It no longer is. If you want to know more about string theory, I recommend you read Yardis and Now's book, Shape of Feminist Space, or Joseph Conlon's Why String Theory. If you want to know more about what is going wrong with string theory, I recommend you read Peter Voigt's book, Not Even Wrong, or Lee Smolin's book, The Trouble with Physics. And if you want to know more generally what is going wrong with the foundations of physics, I recommend you read my book, Lost in Math.
It smells funny down here. What are you doing down there?
Excuse me, young man. I shouldn't be talking to strangers. Although, it appears you cut your face. You should put some ointment on that.
Can I have my boat back?
Oh, yours? Of course.
Oh, ah.
You know, cuts can lead to infections. Did you have your tetanus shot?
I don't know.
Immunization shots are very important to spread diseases. It's a myth that vaccines cause autism.
Thanks, mister. I'm going now.
Make sure you tell that to your mother. We can't have another epidemic on our hands.
Hey everyone, we are live from my backyard where I am smoking a brisket and some ribs. A brisket on the big guy and some ribs, pork ribs on the green egg. So I'm looking for
I'm back.
So let's watch. This is from Hitchhiker's Guide, because you were talking about the sort of animal holocaust, and it'd be, what if you created an organism, if you were trying to be really ethical and you created an organism that would want to be eaten?
The universe as we know it has been in existence for 170,000 billion years and will be ending in a little over 10 minutes' time. Welcome one and all to Many Ways, the restaurant, the end of the universe. I am your host this evening, Max Clean, and I have come straight from the very, very other end of time, but I've been hosting a show at the Big Bang Burger Bar, where we had a very exciting evening, ladies and gentlemen, and I will be with you right through this tremendous, historic occasion, the end of history.
The joke being that, like, how do you, even if you can travel through time, you travel to the very end of the universe, so everyone who can travel through time is there.
As the force shielded dome above
The predecessor or precursor.
sky, pound ancient light, living in swollen stars, I can see that we are in for a fabulous evening's apocalypse.
Would you all like to see the menu, or would you care to get the dish of the meat?
What is it?
It's an Miglian major cow. I'll bring him over.
Okay, we'll meet the meat. That's cool.
So the bee has to be conscious enough to tell everyone that it wants to be eaten. So we made him smarter.
It's like Meeseeks.
Well,
basically, yeah, it's a slave that's like, that's all I want to do.
Do you want to show that?
Well, naturally mine, sir. Nobody else's is mine to offer. The rump is very good, sir. I have been exercising and eating plenty of grain, so there's a lot of good meat there.
There's probably a political element to him having an Irish accent, too.
This animal actually wants us to eat it.
Me? I don't mean it. I think it's horrible. It's the most revolting thing I've ever heard. Hey, what's the problem? I don't want to eat an animal that's lying there inviting me to. I think it's heartless. Well, then
wait a minute.
Well, maybe it is the point. I don't care. I don't want to talk about it. I'll have a green salad.
It's fucking genius.
Myself for months.
Green salad.
This is the meaning of the universe.
I mean, this is my favorite book in the world, Hitchhiker's Guide to the Galaxy.
Never read it.
Actually, he fucking talked about it in an interview just recently. My favorite book.
That wonderful book by Douglas Adams. That was
Yeah.
that was a key book for you. What was it about that book?
I guess when I was in around
12 or 13, I had kind of an existential crisis, and I was reading various books on life and, well, like, what does it all mean? Because it starts seeming quite meaningless. And we happen to have like some books by Nietzsche and Schopenhauer in the house, which you should not read at age 14. It's really negative. Then I read Hitchhiker's Guide to the Galaxy, which was like quite positive, I think, and it sort of highlighted an important point, which is that a lot of times the question is harder than the answer, and if you can properly phrase the question, then the answer is the easy part. And so, if to the degree that we can better understand the universe, then we better know what questions to ask, and then whatever the question is that most approximates what's the meaning of life, you know, that's the question we could ultimately get closer to understanding.
They build a giant computer for this.
Well, the degree that we can expand the scope and scale of consciousness and knowledge, human knowledge, then that would be a good thing.
Interesting.
Yeah, it's a pretty fucking fascinating. I mean, I didn't understand the depth quite when I first read it.
What do you think about that conclusion?
Oh, the question versus the
degree to which we can understand the universe will allow us to answer what the meaning of life is. Do you think that's true?
You can probably more like it's kind of a what do they say, quixotic, but it's Don Quixote. The sort of the quest is the point, or that is the meta point, and so there's more to discover each time. Like the fact that Penrose has his ideas means that there's still this at least to people far smarter than me, there's still a debate. And so if there's still a debate, you know, I guess the depressive kind of probably a lot of the rationalists are like this, but the view might just be, oh, well, let's see, you know, it's like, let's see what I gotta not kill myself because I want to see the next Rick and Morty, right? That's coming, you know. But also it's to continue to find out, to continue asking that question, and asking it in weirder and newer ways. And it's kind of like, what is the question? Oh, well, you don't even really know what that is. It's kind of, it might even be a case of like, you know, the other option is reverse. It's like reverse or death, or keep asking the question, why persist? Why, besides the fact that you'll go to jail, why not murder, you know, more regularly? Why it's surprising that people don't do that. Well, part of it is you can look at like, so then you can start studying population dynamics and say, okay, why would we get into groups, and why do we interact in certain ways? Why do we construct moral systems and all this stuff? Okay, so the whole time you're exploring that, there's a unknown, there's a motivator to continuing to discover things. There's like it's an interesting question, and it is related to the meaning of life at least in the sense that the meaning of life is related to morality. So then you say, okay, what about consciousness? What is this crazy, you know, state that we're in? Okay, that's another question that you can keep asking. There's another, it's actually, and it's related to the quote unquote meaning of life thing, which is, again, it's like ascribing meaning to things is just, you just come up with a hierarchy of like the meaning for why I would have a bed instead of sleeping on the floor is because I don't want to have a sore back the next day, and I want to sleep comfortably is a short-term thing, but there are many long-term reasons for why you'd want to have that instead of not having that. And then you might be like, well, you know, okay, I'm just one person. Why would I deserve that? Why everyone should be able to sleep in a bed, and everyone should have a roof over their heads? It's kind of you're like, well, why are you being so nice? Why not just, well, it's sort of because I asked the question. The question led me again to this further exploration of something that wasn't in my brain before, but that maybe could be one day, maybe. And then
yeah, but then if that's true, then like it doesn't seem like getting more knowledge is. You're not like solving that problem. You're just
Yeah, you might find that you're just you either so civilization would say, well, look at our bountiful Library of Alexandria that we have here. Look
no,
at
I
this.
agree.
Or
I'm not
whatever
saying that things can't get better,
hmm
right?
They can
Like
certainly get
experience.
worse. That's the
Yeah.
Petersonian
Well,
observation.
the point is like I think we want to make experience better because it feels better.
Yeah. But then why would you want to feel better? Well,
Because it
because I want to
does.
feel better. It's just
Right.
kind of, and that's the short-term motivation, the limbic, or
But
sort
that's
of,
also the long-term motivation.
well, but you want fulfillment in the long term more so because people are
Well,
willing
how
to
do you
take
have
on a lot of
fulfillment if
pain.
okay, sure.
I
But
would be willing to take on a lot of pain to learn more stuff.
sure. But my point is you don't have fulfillment like without um feeling good at least some of the time.
Right. Agreed. There's creature comforts.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So
There's a upper bound to that, and then you're like, well, why does Bezos even exist? Like, what level of creature comfort requires? What do you sleep on a bed that has to get constructed by 3D printing
no,
assembly?
but it's not like when he has that much money, it's not even about how much money he has anymore. Like his money doesn't have anything to do with like what comforts he wants. It's like what can he build?
If anything, it becomes a terrifying prison at that level. It's you can't do a bunch of stuff because your interactions with people are all, like Michael Jackson growing up, probably. Nobody was ever honest with because you're the fucking everyone knows who you are. And so you could be like, I want that level of fame, but then clearly it's a nightmare under certain conditions because no
I don't
one
know
you
if
ever
it's a
interact with.
nightmare.
It's certainly something people want to flee from. There was the
I
stand-up
think
that
you lose certain things, but I
Eddie
don't know if I'll
Murphy.
call it a nightmare.
What?
I think
You do lose some things. I'd call it another kind of nightmare. I think a billionaire is a failure mode. People say it's a failure mode of capitalism, but like it's a failure mode of the universe that you can get to that level and then because you're now a giant pile of cash to anyone because there's so many things that most people really do need money for and they'd be like, I gotta
But
grovel
why
to
is it
this.
a failure mode? Look at what Bill Gates is doing with his money. Like, okay, so the problem,
Hanging out with Epstein. Sorry. How does he's now Bill Gates is back to being the richest dude in the world. Did you know that? That just happened very recently.
yeah, but I mean, okay, it
It
doesn't
depends
matter.
on Microsoft stock, basically. That's
Right, right, and it's just like, okay, but the point is that, you know, like why is it a failure mode? I think it just depends. If that person's taking that money and literally like, you know, making toilet technology more readily accessible to people, they can sort of
it's not a failure mode of civilization to have the ability to move around wealth. Is that what you mean?
I don't see how it is a failure mode, period.
Well, so if you are at that high of a tower, the ability to actually put out your wealth in a way where you can feel comfortable that it's not turning into like a local human trafficking operation in Thailand, that probably gets less and less as you're more and more. I mean, you can maybe you could fund people there's an oversight, but like, how does one person coordinate that much wealth and power? You
Hire
can't.
other people to do it.
You can hire other people to do it. How do you trust the hierarchy down the chain? That's
Well, that's where you have to work.
you just
It's
basically
like
you're a dense
starting a business. You have to work at it.
and businesses do some nightmarish things because the LLC is limited liability.
You say
So
a
that
business is a failure mode?
I would say Taleb might say that the modern concept of a corporation, there's not enough skin in the game. There's not enough. If you can be sure, you can certainly be sure of your own life. I mean, within the limitations of memory, you can be sure that you haven't started a human trafficking operation in Thailand. But if you have billions of dollars and you've set up funds, and you're almost guaranteed that your world line that you're influencing, that if you hadn't existed, it wouldn't be structured this way. You can guarantee, oh shit, there's a fuck up that's so bad.
Yeah, but
that,
just by participating in capitalism, you can be sure that you're contributing to some things that you morally object to, right? Just by
yeah,
participating. It's not like having a car, but like just anything.
but what does it then mean you morally object to those things? You must just have degrees of morally objecting, because
Yeah.
otherwise you're complicit by participating. And so I'm not saying that's the case. I'm saying that everyone participating in capitalism has taken their morality in degrees, they're not a hardcore anarchist, they're not a hardcore something, that
No.
hardcore being so extreme that they truly are following all the tenets of X.
Yeah.
It's like joining a group is the same thing we came back to before. Is like you end up giving up something by some of your tax money is funding black ops in Bolivia that, fucking.
Right.
Did you see the Bolivian CIA Twitter? This was it was Virginia. Twitter. Why are bots trying to convince people? No, that's not it. It's not the bot thing.
Well,
Here it
how
is.
they like released a bunch of bots on Twitter as soon as the Morales thing came out.
Sorry, the what? Oh yeah, the Bolivian. No,
Yeah,
those were the first few articles I saw. This was trending in Virginia. Bolivia, no hay golpe is, I think it's not a coup, but trending in Virginia. Either this is just a screenshot of that's fake, which is possible because I couldn't find any direct evidence, or the CIA, because Virginia is like, I think one region in Virginia is where the CIA has its headquarters, and I don't remember the Langley, but the idea, like, look at the fact that would be trending there is that they're not using VPNs, the CIA, like, I don't know. Anyway, that was the meme, was basically that, why is this trending in Virginia if it's a Spanish language thing about Bolivia?
Oh yes, clearly, dude. Kyle Kalinske was talking about this. As soon as like the coup happened, anybody who tried to talk about the Bolivian coup on Twitter just got like spam
bombarded with
bots from like people who from like accounts that were created like this month, like thousands of them.
I
think Russia's the only one using bots. Like, come on.
Yeah, no, everyone is, of course. Yeah. I think this is just good evidence, and this is reassuring to me. It's good evidence that they're losing control of the narrative. They just being
they're
massive institutions, because like you can just
because it's a crappy way to try to control a narrative. It doesn't work.
Well, it means that they've run out of other ways. It used to be you could show up quietly at the 5 major news organizations and just tell them,
this is what we're doing.
Democracy, this is freedom, but you're not going to talk about this range of things, and you are going to push these things
because you love America.
Because you love America. And I think I'm trying to remember if it was Eric Schmidt who said this, but basically, and I've tried to find this quote before, so maybe I just hallucinated it, but Google basically was saying, like, ultimately we try to have a code of ethics, but ultimately the CIA and the various 3 letters are the ones with the guns. So like, they show up at the printing press with the guns. That's always been but it's like encryption, that there's still, unless they can put backdoors in enough systems, which it's hard to do that, or it's impossible to do that in certain sense in open source systems. If you can't put a backdoor in something, and you can't show up at all the different potential media organizations with guns, then like there's just too many of them, then you end up with something like Epstein getting arrested because it just proliferates. And that gives me hope, because it means that not necessarily that the system's crumbling, but that the veneer, the fake part is maybe.
I think so. Yeah.
I hope so.
I mean, I think, unfortunately, a section of our population has just like their minds are just like hopelessly lost, essentially. Like
They've checked out.
lack of neuroplasticity, whatever the reason may be.
Yeah.
But certainly, people in our generation, like nobody trusts the media, dude.
Yeah, and
Like
look at the
even in
fucking
Gen
Zoomers.
X.
Right. Yeah, I mean, our parents' generation,
Yeah,
only some of them are particularly trusting now.
only
And
some of them.
it's
Yeah,
less and less.
it's less and less. Yeah.
After that fucking the ABC gun show,
That was so
that
ridiculous.
oh my god.
That was so, and it's so crazy because the fact checkers are like, "Oh, it was just a mistake." It's just so Orwellian that the fact checking is just another source of propaganda.
I can't believe. So that comes back to that, like, who can you trust?
No one.
No one fully, I think.
Yeah.
Probably. No, it's not to say you can't trust anyone, but you should
Not
just
fully.
hedge your trust, I guess.
And the people who are in the business of saying you can trust me are the people you should trust the least.
That
Listen,
tends to be
one
the
of
case.
my
And certainly the
favorite people.
talking head types. We learned that with
What kind of message is that to the next ally that wants
I
to
don't know
side
why
with
I
us?
have the Fox News one up on
saying,
CNN, but
good luck.
that's Trump pulling. This is bullshit. All right. Anyway, I'm trying to find the footage, and of course it's gone. But the Kentucky gun range.
Oh, dude, yeah, that was completely insane. Oh, wait, did they take it down?
Well, you can't. That's the other thing. You can't take it down off. The internet was made to survive nuclear bombs. That
Yeah.
was the point of the protocol. It was developed by fucking ARPANET, or it's ARPANET. It was developed by ARPA, and now DARPA is, the continuation of that. But the fact that it's so difficult, at least, to take down. This is a fucking gun show, and the fact that it's so difficult to take down, even for the powers that be or whatever. That's what's given me hope here.
Well, what's gonna happen with Starlink also?
Right, it'll just
Because
get
now they
harder.
can still like
That's
go.
the idea.
They can still shut it down. Shut down specific apps or specific websites. Like for example,
Oh,
during,
you're saying
like
Go
the
ahead.
Liberian government shut down WhatsApp during the last major protests.
In Iran, I think they shut down their whole internet.
Yeah, but like at some point, that's just not going to be possible.
Oh, Iran turned off the internet. Often it isn't as easy as flipping a switch. Often it's like you're rerouting traffic massively, which is one of those things that only works for a little while. And then you end up with avenues out, and then everybody uses those avenues out. Maybe there's a big bottleneck, but ultimately the demand for connection and for information ends up winning out. So it's always a temporary measure, but then also you
Do you think ultimately the
becomes
nation?
robust to that.
Do you think ultimately the nation state will just not like work as a framework? Like
Yeah.
Chomsky says it's an illegitimate source of power.
I mean,
like on the most fundamental level, even if like we, even if it's sort of like a necessary evil.
Chomsky's saying
it's an interesting. Okay, I mean,
it was kind of an inevitability of agriculture and industry and all these different.
Yeah, but like, so I like anarchists are like, we challenge power. If you're an anarchist, you go to power, you say, are you a source of power? If so, justify yourself. That's what anarchism is on the broadest level. And the idea is that the nation state itself is an illegitimate source of power. And that eventually, once the tools are in place, it won't be able to justify itself.
Right.
And I kind of, when you see governments doing things with money that are just like completely unacceptable, I get the feeling that that's probably true.
Yeah.
You know, like.
I wonder to what extent like blockchain type, encryption type stuff will be involved in, because I was telling you about the I mean, Bitcoin, part of its value is derived from the fact that it can be used even when the government collapses. And
Yeah.
while that's not happening everywhere, it's certainly happening somewhere at any one time.
Right.
So that the system's all linked together, and so it's like other people are speculating on it, but in certain places they're fucking using it for actual things and illegal trade. That's the other.
It's just that I think when electronics become ubiquitous enough, that's going to be the case. Because in the countries where you're having actual a collapse of that sort, a lot of people just don't have the kinds of electronics. And the blockchain stuff is just not good enough right now. Like the interfaces are not good enough where you could just easily have Bitcoin on like the cheapest type of phone, be able to interchange it with other people. I think we're not there yet.
And you can have like, if you know a system through and through, you, for example, maybe you don't know how to code, but you trust someone else who does, and they've gone through the open source code on something and they know there's not a backdoor, and then you take it and you compile that yourself, barring some fuck up with the compiler itself where there's a backdoor built into that, which that's always a possibility, and that would be the way to put it. But you can kind of bootstrap it by writing your own compiler, I guess, if you want to. But ultimately, you can have a trustworthy thing in the universe, a physical system that you can trust through and through. It's just how many people can get to that state. What?
It's also going to have its limitations.
This is then where that whole quantum checksumming and proving reality's consistency or thoroughness and hearing the shape of a drum and stuff like that, kind of, it all comes into play, because it's like, can you scan a AI and know that that AI is not going to kill you right before you find Epstein Island? If it's because you figure, oh, the AI was made by Robots Inc., and then Robots Inc. turns out to be owned by a subsidiary of the Epstein Corp, and so like that
Why do all roads? It's like 2350. All roads lead to Epstein.
They do. Weirdly enough, yeah. Well, or whoever was fronting Epstein, anyway. While you were gone, I actually pulled up our first mention of Epstein, which was episode 2.
Interesting.
Yeah, it's like February 2018.
Did you play it?
Oh, I did already, but here, I'll pull it up. Actually, shit, did I? Yeah, here we go. Oh wait, that was episode 1. My bad. So that was 2017.
From the South Park episode that I was trying to look up before was the direct quote is, "There's another guy, someone else who was in the witches club but hasn't been around for a while." I don't think that's about Weinstein. Everybody thinks the episode's about Weinstein. That's true. That sounds like it's Epstein, actually. But you know, but what do I know?
That's a rabbit hole. Anyway, let's get back.
That's a rabbit hole. Same. That was, more than 2 years ago. So.
Wow, I look so much younger. Not that much younger.
Oh. Yeah, me too. I was pudgier. Yeah. I was a fat fuck back then. Jesus.
You lost so much weight.
Hey man, you cut out wheat. That was the big. I think that's that's part of that tism. It's that tism.
Whatever. All right, dude. I think it's becoming about that time.
All right.
We'll wind it down.
Good cast.
Yeah. I like these. Our kids will watch them one day. Be like,
one day. Or some AI that has our kids downloaded into it. And it's experimenting on them. All right.
It's so weird. Like, Pete Buttigieg was asked a question about, like, oh, is the government spending too much money on the military? And he was just like, well, I don't know. We just don't have a strategy. We should, like, be investing more in AI. So he was.
Is he trying to get on the Yang side of things? And
so there's a whole thing where, like, the people who made videos of Buttigieg just, like, trying to sound like Yang. terrible.
That's so. Oh, that's
Sucks
just.
so
It's a
much.
bunch of billionaires in a trench coat.
Oh god. Yeah. Well,
All right. I'm gonna stop the stream now. Here.